This is Monday, February 9th, 2015 at Jefferson School, the board meeting of District 64. I'd like to open it and then make some remarks. So, Vicki, please take the roll.
Dan Collins.
Here.
Dathan Paterno.
They'll be here late.
Scott Zimmerman.
Here.
Tony Borelli.
Here.
Vicki Lee is here. John Heidi.
Here.
Bob Johnson.
Here.
Okay, remarks will be held off until we open our regular meeting. I would like to make a motion to go into closed session. We have several things to do tonight that may take some time. Specifically, pursuant to 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C1, which is discussion of specific employees, and 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C11 for potential litigation. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We'll take a roll call. Danny?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll go immediately into close. Reconvening the Board of Education special board meeting. Today's February 9th, 2015. The board for the past hour and a half has been in closed session discussing various items. We will be convening into a committee of the whole with financial projections, followed by our regular board meeting, which is going to occur somewhere around 8:15. There will be some announcements and some verbiage as we go into our regular meeting, but not to spend any more time, I'd like to turn it over to Becky to begin the financial projection component of our meeting.
Thank you very much. Tonight I have Howard Kraus from PMA with us. He was here a year ago with us as we presented the new model for financial projections. And I like to always qualify this presentation by saying the numbers, the results, are based upon a series of assumptions. If you agree with the assumptions, you'll agree with our numbers. If you question the assumptions, then the numbers will change as we alter those assumptions. So please remember that as we go forward. I think one of the biggest changes that you'll see as we go through this is what the economy continues to do to us. And when that December CPI was issued in January, it was a 0.8%. Last year, if you'll recall, when we built the financial projections, we built them on 1.5, 2, 1.5, 2. And so now we're building them on 0.8, 1.3, 0.8, 1.3. That makes a dramatic impact on the revenue side of our budgets. And so that if that were the only variable that we've altered, you would see the impact of that. As we analyze the expenditure side of the budget, we felt that when we looked at the teacher scattergram, which is in enrollment, and the combination of those two factors, that when we analyzed our past staffing patterns, that we've added staff that were outside of classrooms that would have been driven by enrollment, so that we now included a factor in for what you've all heard us call for years, the bubble classrooms, and those non-classroom positions such as, could be TPI, it could be social workers, it could be psychologists, it could be speech and language, it could be any one of those things that would not be driven by the classroom guidelines that we currently have. So as we go through this, be patient, write your questions, ask your questions. At the end of the evening, if we all agree on what the presentation should be and look like, we will update our financial reports on our webpage to coincide with this. If you want us to go back and run some additional scenarios and bring it back to you, then those reports on the webpage will not be updated until we all come to consensus on what it should actually look like when we go out there.
As we go through this, would you like questions at the end or as we go through it?
I think Howie and I will take them as we go through, and if, I'm going to turn this over to Howie right now, and I certainly, not being bashful, will certainly voice my opinion as we go through here.
I would never have expected less. The financial projections, we do gather historical information based on your annual financial reports, and the basis for the projections going forward begins with the FY15 adopted budget. We are collecting the information on tax levies and extensions, and then, as Becky mentioned, using those CPI projections along with new construction to project what your tax revenue, the largest portion of your revenue stream, will be in future years. You would note that, well, perhaps I'll hit that in just a couple of minutes, about distributions in Cook County's tax collection system and how it adds a few wrinkles when CPI is going up and down. And the enrollment, as Becky said, calculating moving people down through your salary schedule. We're calculating needs based on enrollment, and then those bubble classrooms are factored in. So, next one, please. As we said, property taxes, more than 85% of your revenues. So the single biggest factor on your revenue growth is what the CPI that's in effect for each of those given levy years. The levy years, for your levy, for example, that you passed in December, in March, Cook County will take taxes for at 55% of last year's extension, and then in September they'll collect the rest. When CPI goes up and down, and they still take 55% of the prior year, it can mean that in the following fiscal year, you may actually see a small drop in the revenue from property taxes. It catches up. It's just a short-term timing issue in the way Cook County collects the taxes. So local revenues, we've talked about CPI. The average, as Becky said, 0.8, 1.3, 0.8, 1.3. In your case, a 1% CPI increase is approximately $62,000 in operating funds. So we're looking at that spread as we move forward. We're talking about the 0.8% CPI for fiscal year 17 for tax collections. And that will be, as we see it, a little bit lower than your tax collections for FY16, as an example. So we are projecting the existing EAV to be flat this year and next. That's reflective of last year being your triennial reassessment, hoping that the Cook County multiplier stays flat as well as they catch up. The majority of the decrease in Cook County will be south, so in a typical cycle, you'd be relatively flat. And then we're looking at an increase of about 6.5% in levy year 16, and repeating the cycle of 0, 0, then 6.5, 0, and 0, which has been more typical of Cook County assessments prior to the crash.
Around 08, 09, I know there was, Cook County did a readjustment. The EAV didn't drop, but the multiplier dropped. Is that right?
It's been dropping the last couple years after rising. I think it was still rising in 08, 09, and that was when the state imposes that multiplier on the county by saying the assessors must come up to what we expect Cook County assessments to be equal to 33% that we see in the other counties. And so that multiplier is layered on.
So the multiplier times the EAV will give the total EAV that's utilized to calculate the limiting rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The new property estimates, $4.3 million this year, then $3.3 in subsequent years. $1 million of new construction times your operating tax rate generates approximately $43,000 for each million of new construction. General state aid, we are expecting now that it will remain at 89% of the formula, your entitlement for the foreseeable future, until or unless legislation changes that. Our best information from legislators is they're committed to not going below the 89%, but that may mean that in a bad budget year from the state level, we'll see reductions in categoricals. We're not projecting categoricals to change at this point until we see what will happen in the legislative session. But there is growing concern that the state, because of cash flow, will not be able to make a payment before the fourth categorical payment before June 30th, but hopefully it will occur in a time when your accrual basis will bring it back.
So Howard, when you talk about this 89%, so is that sort of the level we're being paid at currently by the state, or are you projecting that we'll be paid a little bit less than we're currently being paid?
We've been paid at that 89% now. I think this is the third year.
Okay.
So there's a pattern, and that seems to be the new normal.
Thanks.
We're not expecting any impact from federal revenues.
I would just add here, there's that, you heard a lot of conversation in the spring about Senate Bill 16 and the effects on state revenues to local districts. That has now, Senate Bill 16 doesn't exist anymore. They're rolling it into Senate Bill 1. It's right now just a shell bill and doesn't really have any language or teeth behind it right now. But everybody expects that to change sometime in the near future.
And the comment about this categorical payment, is this just viewed as a timing issue? Like we expect that we would get paid, it just might not be right away?
We're believing that the FY15 categoricals are timing. We assume that that will be the same right now for 16 through 20, but if there are cuts to be made in the state board budget, they are likely to impact in some way, one or more of those categoricals. So this is what the overall equalized assessed valuation for the district looks like with the projections we just discussed. And the next one is the history of new growth. All but 2012 levy year, you've been higher than the 4.3 or the 3.3, but again, being very conservative in the revenue side in particular. General state aid, we're actually expecting it to go up slightly next year, and that's because your assessed valuations have fallen. And so you have slightly less local resources, and so at 89%, you'd get a little bit more, but we expect with those zeros there to really be flat over the period of time. On the expenditure side, like every district we serve, the highest amounts are for salaries and benefits at almost 83% for the district. That would be normal for districts that do almost everything in-house. And you'll see small amounts for capital outlay for other objects, supplies, purchase services, or primarily contracts for things like special ed transportation. Your contract runs through 2016 with future years to be negotiated. We put in a placeholder. We've added additional staff on top of enrollment projected in changes at the rate of 4.5 FTE per year.
Again, this is based upon those staff members, as I said earlier, that it would not be tied to enrollment. But the comment there, it says if staffing decisions continue to be made in accordance with past practice, really looks at those class size guidelines and how we define how we add additional staff and whether we have the ability within the contract or outside the contract to make any alterations to that.
I don't know if I'm hearing anything in between the lines, but forget that. The 4.5, how many years did you go back to calculate?
I went back 5 years,
5 years.
and that's actually less than the average over the 5 years.
Okay.
And Becky, just to be clear what you're talking about here, if I understand this right, what you're saying is over the last 5 years, for reasons other than enrollment fluctuations, we have just happened to add staff for various miscellaneous reasons.
For supplemental services to improve services to kids.
We've added tech coaches and we've added literacy specialists, et cetera. And so what you're doing is you're building in a conservative assumption that chances are we'll be asked to add another approximately
Correct.
4.5 FTEs this year.
Correct.
And next year and the year after.
Correct.
Now, if we choose to hold the line and say, no, you can't have extra FTEs, then obviously that improves the assumption.
Absolutely. And that's why I put those qualifiers up front. If you agree with our assumptions, you'll agree with our numbers, and if you don't, then we will rerun the scenarios and bring it back for the board's review.
So, and based on our number of staff, that'd be about a 1% growth, right, for 4.5 teachers, right?
Right.
So is it safe to say, I hate to use the term, but is it safe to say this is a worst-case scenario? Worst in the sense that this is what the average is, this is what you can expect. If you make any plans or changes going forward, it'll improve the bottom line.
Correct. And I've always said, my philosophy for all the years I've been in this profession is you budget both revenues and expenditures conservatively so that you're very cautious on the revenue side. You don't overestimate your revenues, and on the expense side, you don't underestimate your expenditures. You look at what are the possibilities and build in for those possibilities.
Well, to that end, are there any possibilities in the pipeline that we're aware of? And I think there's one or two areas that you've already mentioned, Lori, that potentially may increase this number. For instance, I think that we've already heard about EL, and EL is going to be at least one position, so that tells me that this 4.5 is probably going to be 5.5.
Well, when we get to the staffing report later in the budget, you'll see that, from my perspective, that those additions that we're going to be talking about later are a part of this 4.5
Okay.
for this particular budget year.
Okay.
Becky, actually kind of building on Tony's thought here, because I was overwhelmed by that number. I realize we've done it in the past, but we've had specific long-range visions for what these positions would be. You know, and after a year or 2 years of this going on, because this goes out to at least 2021, you know, that's $1 million after 2 years roughly in salary, and then after that it's $2 million. I mean, that's the whole capital budget we used to study over and over again.
Correct.
So my question is, other than the ELL and the, you know, that one employee there that we were talking or whatever, is there specific plans that you guys may be thinking of, they're not fully baked, that you really envision here? Or is it, again, is it just conservatism? Because I'm not aware of any long-range plans where I'm comfortable putting that much in there and looking that pessimistically at it if we're not, you know, I understand bubble classes, but over a long haul, bubble classes should average flat, theoretically, right? Because you had 4.5 teachers this year and 4.5 teachers the next year, and we do this for 4 or 5 years. That's a lot of
That's a lot
classrooms.
of-
We don't even have built,
Yeah,
you know, space
Scott,
for
can
them,
I
right?
jump in? And I'm going to jump ahead from what I'm going to be up here doing with Becky a little bit earlier, but
We can
I
talk
think
about that then.
what I might say that might help on this is, I know what Becky's saying, and I'm not disputing those numbers at all, because John's absolutely right. We've added literacy teachers, we've added tech coaches, and things, those cross the line.
Psychologists.
But I think what you saw in the presentation that's coming and that was sent to the board is that we are very cognizant of that fact of looking where our staffing is going forward. And you'll look at the fact that outside of the bubbles that we don't control, you know, and by that the enrollments, you know, could ebb and flow, it's out of our control. You'll see that that is basically a staffing zero addition for this coming year, that we have looked at. If we are going to add, there's an offset to that. So that if you look at that number in the staffing, that report is that if you take out those bubbles, there is no increase. That it will look the same. Now again, we don't control the bubbles, I don't control some of those other things. The one that is always out of the, you know, that we don't also control, for example, if we were to have a large number of somebody move in special ed or something, that would affect those things out of our control. But the things that are within our control, we are not asking for anything more than what we are taking away. And we're very cognizant of that, of looking forward, of making sure that we understand the financial situation of the district, we understand the direction of trying to reach 2021, of being very secure that when we are asking for something, we are not continually looking to go up, you know, and we want more and we want more and we want more, so that it is a continually building process. We are very cognizant of the fact that we are looking at staffing moving forward, that we are trying to be as fiscally responsible to the board and our community as possible.
And I have no doubt, I guess, and I don't know if the appropriate time for the discussion is now or later, but I am presuming that it would be worthwhile for the board to have a discussion about whether or not we think we should be budgeting the 4.5 FTEs, because again, that's 18 teachers before we, or more than we, before we even get to 2020, and we don't know what they're for. We have no long-range plans for them. I'm concerned.
But
that
the
maybe we
4.5
should-
includes all those supplemental services that we may have added, plus bubble classrooms, because those don't, when you look at a teacher scattergram and you do our class size sections, it may, as you'll see in the staffing report, we could actually be reducing 3 teachers next year if we were just looking at that. We know that there are sections that are within 1 or 2 of those class size guidelines, and the likelihood that we may flip those classrooms and have to add a section are realistic.
Yeah.
Is the 4.5
Yeah, here's
number
what
the
I'm getting at with that,
realistic
Becky,
number?
though, is my point is, if we do that to 2021, which is 6 years from now, right? We're adding 27 teachers to the staff. There is absolutely no way in my mind I can fathom that we're gonna have so many bubbles that 27 new teachers will be here 6 years from now. We don't have the classrooms for it. We'd be putting trailers out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's where I'm kind of just saying that I respect that we wanna be conservative. I truly do. But I'm concerned that maybe we ought to be thinking, you know, on average 1 or 2. I would say if we get it to that point where we have to have 27 new teachers, I guarantee there will be a new policy in terms of how many students. Because we're gonna, eventually, if you take it to its logical end, you'll have a 1-to-1 ratio of teachers and students.
I guess my suggestion for forecasting would be, I would forecast whatever you're proposing for this year. And then I would forecast just the enrollment changes going forward. And the reason I would do that is, I think the baseline ought to be no action. And then if the board is considering adding a new group of employees for some reason, that ought to be an add-on. And it ought to be made as a recommendation with a sensitivity analysis to the projection. Here's our baseline with no new teachers. We're suggesting you add 5 this year. Here's the projection with the new 5. And the board, at that point, can then choose whether they like the baseline or the thing with 5 added.
So
But I would not create a baseline where people are being added automatically. Because if nothing else, it kind of creates a system where it becomes easier to add them.
So no allocation for bubble classrooms either.
Well, I would forecast what you are recommending for
Okay.
this year, and I would not make any forecasts on top of what your enrollment model tells you
Okay.
for future years. That's what I would do. You know, and next year, you know, you would do the same thing, and if you get a yen that you ought to be decreasing class sizes at some point, then you bring that to the board along with the impact on the financial model. That's the way I would do it.
In the construction of your budget, you won't know final numbers until arguably 5th day.
6th day.
Sixth day. That's still in time to make your budget presentation, was the end of September anyway, right?
Well, I won't be making the budget presentation.
Yes.
But we'll be looking at the budget calendar later in the agenda, and that's a conversation that we should be having at that point in time.
And one final thought. Let's say you had a bubble class in 2nd grade. Well, that number of students will go to 3rd grade, so you'll need 1 extra grade in 3rd, and 1 in 4th, and 1 in 5th. Well, by the time they hit 5th, that arguing they're moving up the grade and they go to 6th, that should free up 1 person that should basically cycle back. So the way I look at it, I mean, you should drop off a maximum of 5 every year to add 5 every year. It should be the same number in one big old cycle. So arguably, unless you have a year where there's no increase and there are no bubble sections, and you have, let's say, 5 grades going through, there's nothing to drop off, and then you might arguably at that point have some additions. But you would have saved for 5 years the fact that there was no bubbles in that grade.
I wish it worked out that way, Tony.
But that's about as logical as you can make it.
The point is why over the.
I think you're on.
Yeah, sorry. But I would say the course of the last couple of years while we were doing this, it's the fact, that exact scenario of what you said, that as they move through the system, the class sizes enlarge, is part of the reason that why we come and we've been riffing teachers every year, is because we do, as they cycle through, we end up riffing teachers, as we have for the last several years, And then as those bubbles start to burst, we will start to hire back. So this year, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to take the opportunity. If you looked at the projections, it's 3. Now, for the sake of argument, and I'm not going to talk about, we may end up not riffing anybody because of the fact of retirements and other things, but just for the sake of argument, those 3 represent as classes have cycled through. Now, that means, as Becky said, it's 3 regular ed, it's 1 special. The special is made up of a combination of not one person in particular, but a combination of portions of Spanish, PE, blah, 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 that make up, that's a reduction. So we are down based on the cycle through. So if more kids move in and those bubbles burst, then we will start to add back. But keep in mind, it will take 4 just to get back to 0. 0 being the number we are now, so we will reduce it. So it will take at least 4 to burst to get back to the level. So even if you went 4.5, you're still only up 0.5, if that makes sense. It's meaning, and I know Scott's looking, if I reduce by 4 teachers and I burst, if the average is 4.5, and I'm just using this as an example, and I go back and I add 4.5, 4 just gets me back to the number I am right now. I'm really only up half a teacher.
Based on the RIF.
Right.
Based on the RIF.
Yeah, that
Within
would,
that budget, I don't follow that.
what I'm saying, I understand what you're saying, but aren't you, I'm sort of just counting the number of new employees next year
Yeah.
on the payroll. And what I'm hearing, unless I'm misunderstanding, is that we have roughly 433 or something, I can't remember the number.
Yeah, 400.
So say 400, and next year we have 404.5 and 408, and it's perpetual, but I'm seeing that there's no new students. Now, I understand bubble classes, but like I said, if you take it to its logical conclusion, it can't go on forever mathematically, because otherwise you wind up with a 1-to-1 ratio if you keep bubbling, right?
It's not just classroom teachers.
Correct.
The other,
Right, and
head
so,
coaches or
and that's where I'm getting to, are there designs or
Yes.
mandates of which I am unaware that would require 9 new teachers over 6, or I'm sorry,
No.
27 new teachers over 6
No, and I think
years?
that's the point I was trying to make earlier. We are cognizant, or have been, that outside of the bubble classes, of making sure, as if you look in this current one, that it is staff neutral.
I think the missing link here, Joel, is the fact that we don't have a succinct report that shows us we riffed 8, we brought back 7, so that we have a net minus of 1. Or we riffed 8, we brought back 8, we're at 0. I for now 3 years, going on 4, I don't see that comparison, which would to me would be a great help in understanding.
Well, and I think last year, if you recall, in the fall, or sometime back, September or October, Lori, we did a report for the board. We went over the historical staffing for the last 4 years. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the reports that we were to provide the board every fall was a comparison of what our numbers are from last year to the next year. And that was one of the things that Lori said would be coming on an annual basis.
correct.
I guess I would kind of agree with some of the comments that Scott and John have made, that I think from a budgeting perspective, I think there's a concern that if you build in these posts without a concrete plan for what they would be used for, that it could create a financial picture different than where we think we would find ourselves, because we are having a hard time imagining we would have 27 new staff members in 6 years or whatever. And also that absent that maybe we should budget what we know with some certainty, we believe, for the next year, and then sort of be flat going forward. Because I'm in sort of the camp, I'm not concerned with how many get riffed and rehired. It's just on a net basis, how many do we have? And so I think that's some of what I'm hearing is that, hey, let's, for our financial plan, could we, just put in the short term what we believe, and maybe have, even though we've seen historically it's been different, until we get something that sort of educates us to know that number should increase, not to put that into our budget.
I want to be conservative. I completely sympathize with that, but I also don't want to forego good opportunities to make the district better because I'm overly pessimistic, unnecessarily so. I'd rather be as accurate as I guess we can, and as a board, if everyone on the board is comfortable with that, whether that discussion is this moment or you want to plan it for later, I think we ought to come to terms on that and say, please, give you some guidance on please enter this, because, I mean, like I said, I'd hate to forgo a wonderful opportunity to help special needs children or something, because I looked at everything and I thought, oh my God, we're never gonna make it to the finish line, artificially so.
Well, I'm jumping ahead to the staffing report, and with the exception of one position, they're all PREA related, so teacher related. We're saying that there's a reduction of 3 due to enrollment fluctuations. We're adding an ELL teacher. We're reducing a resource teacher and a Jefferson kindergarten teacher. And we're saying that from a bubble classroom standpoint, we think from grades 1 through 8, we're going to add 7, and 2.5 for the specials that go along with those 7 additional. If I've done my math correctly, that's an addition of 5.5 FTE teachers for possible of 5.5 this year.
In which case I might
With the
forecast
bus-
for
with the
next
bubbles.
year 5.5. But for the year after, I wouldn't be forecasting any extra FTEs unless the board adds them.
I think too, if you look at the student population numbers, and you can tell me if this is the way it always is, but if you look at 8th grade, 7th grade, you're 533 students, 482 students. 1st grade, 424. Kindergarten, 424. 100 less students. And I don't know if that's I don't know if that trend will continue or not, and that might be related potentially to the recession and whether people moved into town or had children. I don't know, but that those numbers are remarkably 50 to 100 students off of the upper grade level. So I think there could be a possibility we may not need growth in the numbers of teachers. I think looking at those classes sort of moving up through our system.
If we just go to the next slide really quickly, it shows the history of enrollment, and so that we're projecting a pretty stable enrollment going forward. And as far as certified staff, you can see that we're using those projections, so we can modify those projections of staffing going forward.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The modeling that was done here so the number of students that are listed here is somewhat less than what we have. Are you taking kindergarten students and only counting each one as a half or something? Because our current enrollment's 200 more than this, actually. 4,391 is our 2015 enrollment. And even our other projections that you have down later in another report showing the classes is 4,270 instead of 4,167. So I didn't know if you were counting kindergartners, each one as a half a person, since we only offer half-day kindergarten, or why those numbers were different.
I would let you respond to the kindergarten number, Howie, but these are taken directly from our CASARDA report that we did a year ago, and our September enrollment. And we look at enrollment from a September, the 6-day enrollment, so the 6th day of school every year, and compare it year over year over year. And typically, CASARDA's B projection, which is the most likely projection, is pretty accurate.
Well, I guess I don't understand. We're showing our current enrollment 200 students less than what it actually is. And we're projecting in the classroom report you're showing below 100 more students than what this is showing for next year. So I think we should have that built into this. I don't know why we're reflecting numbers that we know those two numbers almost assured. We definitely know what our current students are. So if we're putting this information out, this information I'm assuming is on the internet for people in the district to look at, and we even report in different places, what the number of students we have. Why would we have something different?
This is based upon the research done by the enrollment, the financial projections use CASARDA's projections. What we do in a district, which is the staffing report I think you're referring to later, is we just take current enrollment and roll them forward. We don't look at mobility on an annual basis. We don't look, there's models out there that would be able to project our enrollment going forward on an annual basis. It's two different methodologies.
I guess I kind of agree with Bob.
Yeah, what's the point of using these data if they're
It's
not
not
accurate?
making sense to me, because I can understand the future ones might be CASARDA, but 2015 ought to be our current 2015 enrollment, not what CASARDA thought it was going to be a couple years ago.
It would not be, what we're counting there and showing is typically your pre-K special ed students through 8th grade. So as you point out, students who are in a preschool program who are not special ed and then not eligible for the general state aid calculations aren't included in that.
So the number I pulled was the number that our staff put together showing these bubble classrooms and everything as K through 8 students. So I guess I don't understand that, why that number's off by.
What do you got, Bob?
And it says its projections do not include the Jefferson, which would be our early childhood
It says our
population.
2014 to 15 number, which shows our Carpenter Field, Franklin, Roosevelt, Washington, Emerson, and Lincoln, 4,391 students.
That was our 6-day enrollment.
Right, and
Yeah.
so up on that bar graph, you're showing 4,191
less
students.
This does not include Jefferson preschool.
And neither
Neither
does
does
the
this.
4,391.
Yeah,
This bubble sheet doesn't have pre-K.
right, so the pre-K would even be greater. So we're 200 off of that number that's showing our current number, and we're 100 off of what next year's number is, which we're saying we pretty much know because we're using it, we're talking about bubble classrooms and teachers. So I got to think there's a way to build this.
I just want to clarify, what's used in the financial projection is 6-day enrollment. This is reflective of our December enrollment.
So did we go up 200 students since September? I find that hard
I
to believe.
doubt it, yeah.
Is it possible that the number at the bottom includes the number of sections rather than just the number of students?
I think he's referring to the columns total by school.
Well, I mean, for
Yeah,
somebody to
dig
say
into
it's a
this.
homework
Yeah,
thing, I would reconcile those numbers and make any changes. you
Bob,
need
do
to.
you have a number in teachers to see if that's what you're hearing? What do you have for teachers, FTE?
Well, I didn't look at that. I just
Okay.
looked at the report we've got below. It supposedly showed the number of students we have in every school, K through 8, and that number's 209, numbers higher than the enrollment. There's no report on teachers to look at.
But actually, regarding the teachers, I do have a question on that. When you look at the enrollment history and projections against the certified staff, the Casarta report suggests in 16, we'll have 4167, which is arguably a smaller enrollment, and yet there is an increase of 3.3 FTEs for next year, which is off the 4.5 number, and yet with a drop down, you'd have to have a heck of a lot of bubbles to, I didn't understand the increase of FTEs when you drop down basically a whole class.
When you're looking at this sheet, as we get into that's attached to the staffing report, those circles represent the bubble classrooms for next year, that they are within one of the class size guidelines. So 2 of pushing us over to add another staff member.
Becky, are those guidelines by the contract? So when we have a bubble class that reaches an excess, do we have to add a teacher?
The contract refers to class section guidelines from, help me out with the year, Joel, 1990-something, yeah.
Okay, I always have to give my response at this. The contract does not guarantee the class size. Our class size policy is from an informal, unwritten policy that the district has followed as long as I've been on the board and longer than that. The contract has provisions about consulting with PREA if we think we're going to go over that. The contract does not promise the teachers that we will continue the same class size policy. Now, it may not be that everyone employed by the district agrees with that interpretation, but that is certainly mine.
On my homework list, I have check enrollment.
Yeah, I checked the numbers on the student thing. It adds up to the 4391 and then 4270. So I just think, we need to
We will
update this.
As we're finishing on this slide, the big thing here is health insurance benefits are projected at a 7% annual increase and dental at 5%. Most of the other types of expenditures are following the same pattern as CPI. So a 0.8, a 1.3, a 0.8, a 1.3 to reflect really control over those expenditures for inflation. And the only one that's really different is the tuition increases that shows up in other objects for purchase services increasing at 3.5%.
If I may ask, you said in terms of the salaries, the teachers are through the contract of fiscal year 16. What did we project from 16 through 21, 22? Did we project, the same annual increase? Did we project the same step and lane? What did we do? Or did we zero?
We extend the current contract out throughout those years because we don't have any other information
So if
to
memory
alter
serves, okay, so with step and with lane and
Correct.
everything like that, okay. That's what I wanted to make sure.
The enrollment and staffing we've covered, the aggregate model, projections, a couple of things, projected deficits with these sets of assumptions over the next 5 years, drawing down your fund balance, and then on the next page, referring back to your 120 days cash on hand policy in 2021. On the following one, we're comparing that projected ending fund balance to 25% of your expenditures.
Could we go back a couple slides, Becky, to that grid? And I guess, yeah, and I don't know if you can read this, Howard, you've got it in front of you.
I do.
So I was just curious, there's some times here where you've got the, on the local revenue line, where you've got local revenue going down, I guess. And could you, because I think I heard before, projecting in CPI growing, projecting EAV, growing in fits and starts. So could you just explain maybe why we think in certain years the local revenue would be down?
I'm going to try to give this in a relatively simplistic, without going into all of the detail. If you have 1.5% CPI for next year's extension, but a 0.8 the following year, the county's going to take in March of next year, they're going to take 55% of your extension that will come out in June. And then whatever's left will show up in September in the new fiscal year. And then, so that number in September is going to be less than the prior year's September. And the 55% of the next year's extension is going to be higher, and then the September will be a little bit higher. What ends up happening is your local revenues change at approximately the difference between CPI. Not the CPI itself, but the difference between them. So when you drop by half, you lose half of the gain for a particular year in the following.
And I guess, yeah, I understand that, so, but I thought the projection earlier was that CPI would grow by 1.1%.
And an average. It's going up at 0.8, then 1.3, then
So in this plan, so you're not planning 1.1%?
No.
If we
every
did that,
year.
it would smooth out.
Okay.
So the dips there and the minuses that's the projection of the 0.8 going forward, and the ups would be the projection of the 1.5 going forward.
Right, 1.3.
Well, yeah.
And I guess one other question. So when you talked about the new construction taxes, so if you were projecting, you said like we said, I think it was $3 million a year, and that we would get like 43,000 of that. So we should get like about 130,000 then in new construction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's split the same way.
Okay.
No, because everybody here lives in, not everybody lives in Cook County, but most of us live in Cook, a lot of you live in Cook County. You know that billing in March is always a percentage of the prior year's tax bill, and it's reconciled in the fall. For those of us who live outside of Cook County, we get two equal installments. One is due June 1st and one is due September 1st. So the rest of the counties wait until they actually calculate their tax bills to send out a tax bill to their families, whereas Cook County always does an estimate, which just makes this more complicated than it really needs to be.
Becky, the salary and benefit costs on the expenditure line, obviously they go up, and are they projected to go up at a 2% per year, or what is the percentage that they're going up?
2% plus step.
So
Would that
This-
include the 4.5 employees each year too?
Correct.
In this projection?
Correct.
And that 2.5 plus step, we have used the number in the past, 3.5.
Correct. An average cost of 1.5 for step.
At somewhere, somehow, some way, I recall our increases, however, being somewhere around 5%.
Well, the 5%,
5.25 is actually.
your increase for that teaching salary line item is a factor of your current staff moving forward, plus any new staff that you would add. There's a slide that I do every budget presentation, is that this is how I got from A to B. And there's an allocation in there for lane movement and the longevity stipends that everybody gets in addition to, once they've sat on step 20 for 1 year, they get that extra 2,000 plus.
So
all of that together equals
All
that.
in is
right.
5.25. But if you take all that periphery away, it's 3.5.
It should be, right. If I was just looking at the same number of staff next year as we have this year, nobody made a lane movement, everybody just moved down the salary schedule one step, you'd be at about 3.5%.
And that, basically, these numbers, they're increasing by 3.5.
Correct.
So the picture, ultra-conservative with the additional staff, indicates that in terms of your fiscal policy, there is some direction to how we staff or how we spend to maintain that promise of fund balance.
This is the graph that shows you, and for days cash on hand, what we will look like as we go out through 2021. You can see that we maintain a positive cash flow position through 2018-19 and dip by 20 days into fiscal year 19-20. And then the year 2021 draws down on cash even more. And this is a result, basically, of the CPI changing. Next year, if nothing else changes, and you have a CPI that's greater, then those days will increase slightly. But again, the further we go out with a tax levy, and the closer we get to the 2021 fiscal year, the less likelihood that you can recover. So Scott, based upon your question that you asked on Saturday, I've included this extra slide that wasn't in your packet, but I did add it here. If the CPIU was flat 1.5% for the 2016 levy and beyond, how would it affect the budget years going forward? And so that you can see the differences, and I will email this to all of you. You will see the differences in the days cash on hand.
Thank you.
Although, Becky, I think it's worth noting here, the difference isn't a whole lot.
No, it's not.
And
Not when
so
you get to the out years.
What I concluded, I mean, if you flip back and forth quickly between those two slides there, okay, just keep flipping, not much. And so, I mean, what that tells me is, yeah, we've got a lower inflation. It's having a little bit of impact on this, but something else is having the bigger impact on this. And my guess is it's that 4.5 teachers you've got in there.
Over this period of time, if you looked at overall revenues from 15 to 20, revenues have increased by 7%, reflective basically of CPI increase over that period of time. Expenditures in this current set of projections by 20%. And that, in essence, is what's driving it down.
Health insurance at 7% and staff.
Okay. The other thing that we mentioned last year is just to keep in the back of your head, when we said, is this worst case, if you will? It is, except for what the state can do. And the pension reform legislation, assuming it almost doesn't matter whether it is declared constitutional or not, it is still likely that at some point in the future, we will see this cost shift of responsibility for pension payments shifting from the state level to the local government level. Not only school districts, but across the board. And last year, the conversation 2 years ago was about 0.5% a year, and increasing. 0.5% for you is about $200,000, which would become $400,000, and then 6, and then 8, and $1 million, until we get to some number to be determined if that's the way it would happen. We only say that, much like we talk about the reduction in categoricals, as those are the landmines, along with changing the general state aid formula, that we cannot predict at this point, whether they will happen or when. So our homework, I think I'm talking for Becky and I, is we will check the enrollment numbers and the projections moving forward, and compare those to the CASARDA, and adjust as we need to reflect current enrollments. I'm assuming that Becky will tell us tomorrow morning what direction specifically, but I'm hearing we will take the projected staffing after you discuss that this evening, use that for 16, and then pull the additional staffing out as of 17.
So it would go up, or would it remain flat?
Well, I don't think you remove those people you're adding, at least that's not what I would recommend. I mean, I'd recommend you forecast what you're recommending for this year, and then going forward, I'd recommend that you only adjust your FTEs according to what the model says based on enrollment.
And then I will have back to Becky tomorrow afternoon revised numbers and presentation as an addendum.
You just find us some more money too, that'd be great.
You'd have to take a number. I'm sorry.
A couple of reactions to this. When I first looked at this, my blood pressure went up quite a bit. And then I went back and I dug up the presentation from a year ago, and it was remarkably the same. The cash days on hand for 2021, and this one is 53.9. A year ago it was 56.1, so it's almost identical. We actually have seen this news before. September, we saw another financial projection, and it was quite a bit rosier. It had us with 125 days cash on hand in 2021. So one thing we may want to look at is what the difference is between last September and today. But I guess even beyond that, what this tells me is we maybe not get to 2021, depending on what assumptions you care to make. We know there are a couple landmines out there as far as the state, which, if I had to bet on whether the outlook is better or worse than it looks on the page, it's probably worse. And that's not good. I think last year we had a little bit of a conversation of, well, what do we do about that? I'd say as the spring goes on, we ought to keep having that conversation, because if we're serious about 2021, we probably need to do something other than business as usual, and if we really expect to arrive there. So, as we look at facilities for the summer, as we look at our staffing plan, we ought to consider whether there are any, whether we need to change the direction of the ship between, in the near term in order to make it to 2021.
John, I thought about that as well, and I thought, at what point does that occur? Now, Becky, does that occur during the budgetary process? Does that occur by board sitting down with you and going on a line-by-line evaluation of this? I mean, in what best manner would we be able to, even for next year, a $500,000 deficit? I mean, in what manner can we analyze that? Or at least, if it is gonna be, it's gonna be, but how do we actually go through and do everything we can, if we can, do anything to alter that?
Well, I would, as we talk about the budget resolution later, where we authorize the production of the annual budget, the process has actually started, that you as a board provide a framework as to what your expectations are when we look at the first budget draft. If you say you want a,
Budget neutral?
that framework could be just about anything.
Okay.
But so that we can build the budget that way and bring it back to the board would be helpful for me as the number cruncher. It's difficult once you get to May and June and have a budget put together, and everybody that has come together over the last several months to provide you information to build that, the structure, to have to go back and say, oops, we're taking it away. It would be beneficial to know on the front end if you're going to ask us to make any alterations to the budget tonight. So I was hoping when we have that budget discussion and pass that resolution later, that we would be having that discussion.
You know, I think the time frame may be pretty compressed here. It depends what you want to do. I mean, if you really want to save money versus what you're seeing on the screen, you either have to put off a facilities project, or you have to do something that will result in the laying off of staff. You are not going to find that money through paper clips and buying less paper. You know, Becky isn't going to find it by renegotiating a contract. So what that means is, if you are going to push off a facilities project, you're going to want to do that in the next month or two before you award the contract. And if you are going to want to do something that is going to result in fewer teaching positions in the district, you need to do that by March, right?
I would just remind you that the Capital Projects Fund was funded by a bond sale last spring, and we are obligated to spend that money on capital projects. It can't be used for anything else. So that we have to follow through with those things that we said when we sold the bond issue, that we were going to do X, Y, and Z.
Then that leaves you with only
But
one
Becky,
option.
don't we usually budget about 1.5 million generally in capital improvements for long-term projects in addition to those bonds?
What we did last year, because of the board consensus goals that said we would use debt service to fund capital projects, we took it out of the O&M fund and made the assumption that the capital projects fund would have resources to fund the projects as we went forward. And so, no, there is not anything currently in the O&M fund to do those projects.
So, Becky, if we did give you some sort of mandate, I mean, there's nothing holding you back from coming back and giving suggestions.
That's very true.
Yes, and you could provide us with suggestions and say, this is an area that needs to be regulated or evaluated or agreed with or whatever. Here's another area. I mean, you could, there's some low-hanging fruit that you can make suggestions and make me more cognizant of.
And that's an administrative team conversation. You hear Dr. Hines refer to that we meet every Monday morning and have discussions on critical issues going on in the district. This certainly, I think, will be a focus as we go forward as to how we can tighten our budget and bring it back in a little bit more of a positive position that may be currently projected.
Perhaps before we mandate anything or look at that, I don't disagree, we'll need to do that, but the elimination of the 4.5 FTEs for 5 years going out, and then coming back with a highlight of this is what's different from September till now, so we can see what may have been some deltas in there and how we value them. I wonder, when seeing how much money that really is, several $1 million, where we wind up. And then I think we can frame the conversation much more accurately after we see that number, and maybe we need to plan, Tony, for another cow before the next meeting or something like that for 45 minutes or an hour to go through those changes, to go through, here's the new projections, and then say, okay, staff, we need to change this or that, or we're pretty darn close, maybe we watch this and this. I got a feeling 4.5 FTEs for 5 years going out probably makes a dent.
Yeah.
When is the first presentation of the budget planned for?
Pull my budget calendar out. It's the first, second Tuesday or Monday in May.
Way too late. We need to do something.
May 11th.
We need to do something in March to plan forward.
But we could have a conversation next meeting in a cow about this with the new numbers, with the 4.5 FTE gone, and I'll bet we're a lot closer to September with that. I'm just guessing, I'm speculating, but I wonder if when we get there, then we can actually have a more accurate idea of the scope of what we need to think about to set her up for the budget in March.
Would you have some data for us in 2 weeks? And first of all, do we have time in 2 weeks?
That's what I'm looking at right now.
Well, you know, while you guys figure that out, a couple observations. You know, one, I think Scott's idea is a good one, you know, because I wouldn't want to react to those numbers on the screen if the numbers are about to change and get a little rosier. On the other hand, if you are going to do something, we are probably already behind. And if, you know, because here's what's going to happen. If you really ask them to cut your budget, they need to come up with a list of programs to put on the chopping block. Or they need to come up with a proposal to increase class sizes. Those are big deals. You know, it's not something that Becky will cook up in her office. You know, it will be traumatic to the staff just to even propose them. You will get a level of fear and anxiety from doing it. You will get a list with dollar amounts. You will start getting people coming to the meetings to plead for their jobs, and you know, various parents coming say, please don't cut the X program. And you will have to allot some time for that, because you will really be non-transparent if you very quickly move from, hey, we need to save a little bit of money, to, okay, we're going to cancel instrumental music. So it takes a number of meetings to go through it. In the past, when I saw this done before I was on the board, they were having those discussions in January. So those big meetings with lines of people waiting for the microphone were going on in January. Best we can probably do is the end of February, early March. So we're already kind of behind. But if they're going to do it, they're really going to have to get on it quickly.
Well, this board has shown that it is quite capable of doing some things pretty rapidly. So I think, Scott, you're absolutely right. I think that the next meeting, the question is if we have time at the next meeting, and if it's tight, we may have to have a supplemental cow
The next
to
meeting
sit
is
down.
tight, not necessarily from the agenda, just to have us time to, our team time to sit and really think through this.
But
No,
you
but
could
her
give
to
us the
crunch the new
projections.
numbers, though,
Yeah.
to take out the 4.5.
That's easy, that's,
Right, and we just want to
No
review
problem.
that, right? We want to review those numbers,
that's a done deal.
not have the big blow-up meeting.
Might I suggest that, you know, Tony, maybe you and I, when we see these numbers coming back, we can maybe make a judgment call and say, is this something where it looks like we're gonna have to have a lot of real big conversations? Or are we relatively close and it's more opportune to say, maybe that's something that gets planned for the year, so that, I mean, you still would have 4 of the 5 years to do something. I just don't know that, John, I agree with you. I don't know that we can affect meaningful change in 3 or 4 weeks, or 3, you know, in a month in March.
If I could give you just the back of the envelope calculation, by 2021, you're looking at about $4.5 million that's of less expenditure over that period of time. So your fund balance, again, back of the envelope, about $4.5 million higher than what you were seeing in the projection, just with that. So, but we will recalculate that, recalibrate that tomorrow.
If our bottom line was added 4.5 million, how many days on hand would that give us?
I'm not going to speculate.
I can't,
Well, let's just, why don't we get the revised
Yeah,
numbers and talk about it?
We'll email it to you.
about 20?
Something like that.
And that might make it happen. Okay. we'll look forward in 2 weeks to get a revised projection, and we will have a bit of a discussion and determine the necessity at that time for a cow on budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
All righty. We will now resume our regular meeting. A couple of comments real quick. I'm looking for that button to bring me back to the front. Our next meeting will be on February 23rd, 2015 at Washington. Start time, I'm planning on a 6 p.m. start time for a closed session with the regular board meeting go at 7:30. The 6 p.m. start time may change because we have the evaluation done tonight. It depends on whether there's other things added, so it's going to be 6 or 6:30, depending upon what items may pop up, and of course I'll keep everybody apprised of that. Some of the items that we'll be discussing next time is tentative calendars for 15, 16, and 16, 17, as well as the authorization staffing plan discussed this evening, ratification of the architect contract, hopefully, and educational ends update, winter map update, and approval of field phase 2. One quick thing is at the end of our last meeting, we were all concerned about safety. We had our superintendent in the parking lot last time scraping her windows with cardboard. So on behalf of myself and the Board of Education, we want you to be safe.
Thank you. My husband took it because he couldn't find his.
Well, now you have your own. Now you have your own.
To tell everybody, thank you.
Yes, I'm concerned that you get home safe and get back to us in the morning.
All right, thank you.
All righty.
I'm so embarrassed.
So, and as we do at all meetings, we have to have public comments. So if there are anybody here who would like to have a public comment on an item that is not included on our agenda, please step forward.
Good evening, thank you. Just myself together
And your name, please?
here. Yes, sir. My name is Rachel Hubbard. I'm a parent, District 64, and kind of prepared a little statement. Never been before a board meeting before, so thank you for your patience. First of all, I would like to thank the board for the opportunity to make a brief comment. I would like to provide you a more personal statement that I won't get into here and now, and I would like that you would possibly read that at your leisure in a private manner. I'd appreciate it. I stand here as a Park Ridge District 64, 11-year resident, and a parent of a 10-year-old special needs child. It has always been my belief that District 64 schools represented the level of educational excellence that all parents desire for their children. Based on my belief of these standards, I expect the district to not only follow all ISBE and IDEA guidelines, but rather to lead as an example. Many of our schools are ranked extremely high in the state of Illinois, and I would look for that type of success and leadership across the board. I would expect that the district would never allow its employees or contractors to fall short of this standard, because I think so much of District 64. Never allowing its employees or contractors to bend the rules in how children are labeled and how IEPs are conducted and implemented. Never allowing a parent to be left out of the team. Never allowing a parent to be underinformed. And so I just came here this evening to thank this board for making sure that those high standards are maintained and kept, because that's my belief. For making sure that parents are informed throughout their children's educational process, the life. And for desiring that parents and educators have the opportunity to work hand in hand to educate our children. And that's about it. I'd just like to thank the board for this opportunity, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At your leisure, board of the board members, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anybody else? Joan?
Actually, I'm not sure. I think this is your first agenda item, although this is regarding the re-verification of residency. And if you want me to wait until you get to that part of your agenda, that's fine.
Well, if you have a comment to make, I mean, whether it's now or later, you're there now, would you like to?
Okay.
Yeah?
I'm here now. I'm Joan Sandrick. I'm a 41-year resident of Park Ridge. I spoke at the last meeting. As you know, I feel quite strongly that re-verification is essential to ensure that the money you're asking us for in increasing numbers is used to educate children who have a legitimate reason to be in District 64. In looking over the paperwork for tonight's meeting, it appears that this is not going to be a yearly situation. It appears it is going to be kindergarten, third, and sixth, and picking up siblings of those same children along the way. I would prefer, quite frankly, to see a yearly verification. 207 thinks it's necessary. Not quite sure the rationale for not doing it is a valid one, but nonetheless. I have looked at the verification steps that 64 requires, and I think I have exchanged emails with business manager Allard, Superintendent Hines, and President Borelli. I think there needs to be some tightening up of the paperwork that's required, and I hope that that will be done. There are many tools available that the district can avail itself of to ensure that the money we give you is indeed spent to educate the students who should be educated with it. Thank you.
Thank you. When we get to this topic, there's going to be, sorry? Which is next, yes. There's two concerns. What are we going to do, and then how are we going to do it? And I think once we decide what we're going to do, then the next answer, that question that must be answered, is how we're going to go about doing that and determining whether the process will be accurate or flawed or whatever have you. So that being said, we are going to go right into that topic, which is the approval for residency of a re-verification plan. It is an action item, and therefore, Dr. Hines.
Sure. So as you just said, this is an action item, and we really are at a critical decision point tonight, because depending on what option we go with, time is becoming increasingly of the essence due to online registration and getting all the ball rolling here. So after our last meeting, we began talking about this in December. We talked again in January, and since the last meeting where we laid out three options for you, options A, B, and C. We walked away with a kind of a few things we wanted to look into to decide what our final recommendation was going to be to this board. So we knew some board members were interested in option C, very clearly. Some were hoping that we were going to go across the board. Other board members weren't really sure if we should go overboard and in their words, with grades K through 8. So option 1 became that middle ground, which was also our first proposal, if you remember back in December, because we wanted to tighten up residency to move beyond kindergarten, and we thought hitting a few other grade levels might be a good initial step to seeing what the process would entail, what it would cost, if we could determine in any way, shape, or form how many kids we were able to filter out that might not actually be residents that are in our schools. That was our original thought. So our little team met again, and we really looked at option A again for re-verification. And we believe that that increased interval is something that we absolutely want to do. We did some number crunching. Brian Emhoff really helped Bernadette crunch some numbers, and we thought with this slightly revised option A proposal, we could hit about 50% of our families in terms of re-verification because of the fact that K-6, we have many families that have siblings or children in multiple grade levels. So we thought it would be a good first pass, a reasonable cost to the district, and a reasonable increase in staff responsibility, all seeming very manageable in the first year that we were going to roll this out. And because we did that number crunching, knowing that although it seems like not that many grade levels, adding 3 and 6, we were going to get to that 50% number. You know, it seemed like a reasonable proposal and one that we wanted to bring to the board as our recommendation and see if you will support that recommendation or if you want us to go the route of option C, which would be all kids, all families.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks for actually going back and forth with us a couple of times to try and provide the board with more information with which to make this decision. So at this point, I'd like to have board comments on various options and on the recommendation put forth by administration.
So I'll go first. I think, you know, my feeling still is that I think, you know, we should be checking all grades. And I think, you know, as we look at those financial projections we just looked at and the costs that we have, and I think if there are opportunities where there are students who should not be attending our schools, and we're talking about, you know, 7 bubbles or whatever or something, and
Right.
those, you know, a difference of 1 or 2 children could be the difference between whether we hire a new teacher or not. And I know it's not exact, but and I think also that it should hopefully give us a sense. I mean, so we have projections on what we anticipate our students will be by school, by grade. And when we implement this program, it would be interesting to see how that changes. And I think the only way we can really determine the efficacy of whether we continue this in the future, if it has value, is to just do it completely once and then see what there is. If there's no change in our enrollment, then and we've identified no one, then I think we say this, you know, this added no value. But if we do see a change and we have reason to believe that, you know, that's a remarkably different number than we would have expected, then I think we could perhaps think that this was a valuable exercise. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Bob. Anybody else?
I just agree with Bob 100%. I think we should start off with option C and then change it as the evidence suggests.
Danny?
The paperwork that we're going to request in option C and the paperwork we're going to request in option A is the same paperwork, right? It's just the number of people that are going to be checked, right? So yeah, my view has always been the same. I want 100% of the students checked, and I want them checked every year. We ask a great deal of our taxpayers. I mean, the amount we ask them to pay for each student, $15,000 a student. I have 2 kids in the school. By no means is that whatever burden's put on me, it's not too much for me to show up and do that. And as I look at the other side of that coin, I look at myself as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for anyone outside the district. So this subject's been on the table for a couple months. I've had no one in the community come up to me and question this and say, I think this is a bad idea. Everyone I've talked to has said, I think this is a great idea, and I think we need to do it immediately. So I'm option C or whatever we can have with the strongest way of checking.
John?
Well, and where I have been for a while, I know I'm in a minority on this. I don't want to see us educating people who are not residents either. I question whether this is going to really do anything toward that goal. We are already seeking residency verification from people as they move in or as they move from house to house. And so what we are looking for, we're proposing to use the same mechanisms more often in an attempt to catch people who evaded those mechanisms in the first place. And I'm not sure why doing that is going to cast catch additional people. I mean, for me, it's kind of like, you've heard of sort of security theater at the airport, where, obviously nobody wants a plane to blow up. Homeland Security does things. Sometimes you get the impression it doesn't really help, but it's there just to make everybody feel like they're doing something. I kind of view this as paperwork theater. It makes people feel that we're being tougher, but I question whether it's really going to do any good. I absolutely could be wrong. We could try and see an enrollment drop, and I'll be the first to say I was wrong about it. But, I can only vote based on the information I have at the moment, and so I'll be a no vote.
Yeah, I respect your view, John. All I think, and my view is that we at least do it once. And if we don't catch anybody, then I think we know it's a waste of time and money. And then we can drop it, or we can
Or
go to
modify
every
it.
once in a while. But I think for our own peace of mind, and for the taxpayers' peace of mind, I think we should at least do it once, and we can always change it after that. I just think that we don't know what we don't know, and this will help us know what we don't know.
And I hear you, and I heard Bob on that as well, and I think those are good thoughts. I appreciate the openness of the people who are going to vote yes in seeing how well this works. That's good thoughts.
Vicki?
I agree with Bob, Dan, and Dathan in that I think for 1 year we should try it and see what we find, and hopefully we won't find anything and we can scale back.
Scotty?
I guess I'm the other minority in this opinion. I'm reminded of the quote, "Don't mistake activity for achievement." I am leery of supporting this, although, again, the last thing in the world I want to do is see someone cheat the system, right? I want to catch them desperately. But to just do this more often without seeing an analysis of process improvement, without seeing a forecast of what we would expect success would look like. We don't even know what those numbers are that we would consider this after a year trial as it's successful or not. That hasn't been articulated as a target. And without funding additional training so the people doing this know the best practices to look for red flags, to look for, why don't you work with the PTOs to be looking for this, for that, the other thing. This, to me, just seems like a lot of effort, and I think we're missing a tremendous opportunity to really improve the process. So I'm having trouble supporting activity for activity's sake, which, again, I hope I'm wrong too. Is it really that harmful? I don't know, but what I fear is we're going to just do this, and this is all we're going to do, and we're missing an opportunity to really make a meaningful attempt at trying to catch the system, the people skirting the system.
And last but not least, me. I agree with you, Scott, that if we just did this just to do it for doing's sake, I think to go along with what John said, it would be kabuki theater. It'd just be an all show and no go. I mean, that's just ridiculous. However, on the other hand, I feel that we don't know what we don't know. And we don't know what it is or isn't. And I think the first year, I strongly believe that the first year we should do all grades. And then at the end of that, analyze what comes up. And if there's not one outlier, then we can modify it. However, taking the second point that you made, going forward, what do you do? And I think that at that point, if we reflect back to what John said at the last meeting, when he asked those pointed questions, what do we have in place now? Well, if we do every child in the district and we lock it down, every new child coming into the district has to be verified. We got it covered going forward, as long as it's screwed down tight so that nothing falls through the system. And that would take care of your second premise. But we don't know what we don't know, and we have to find out, so therefore you got to get a baseline. And in my opinion, I think we have to do everybody at least 1 year. So if you want to make, I think that there's a consensus. Yeah. So if you want to maybe rewrite that, or if there's a board member who wants to make a motion to change this.
Option C is every year, Dan.
Okay.
It's the one you did.
Now, by the way, before we get to it, perhaps now that we have a consensus as to what we're going to do, maybe we should have just a couple of words on how we're going to do it, which would be the flip side of the coin. So I'm not, frankly, I'm not aware, and not knowledgeable about the type of documents that are required. But I guess if you can just tell me, are we on a par with what 207 requires? And that may be for good or bad, I don't know. But are we on a par with them, using them as the baseline? Do we require more than they, less than they, or on a even keel with them?
And Tony, if I could just piggyback on that, or also best practices you've seen in other districts.
Yeah.
As far as, you know, I mean, we don't have enough teeth in this, and maybe we do need to put more teeth in it.
You know, what we collect is what, and this is District 6 for me, is the same material that is collected in every district. You have a certain number of items from one category, a certain number of items that constitute proof of residency from another category. We did not make those lists up. Those lists are standardized for schools to follow in ways of proving residency. So it is pretty standard. Becky, do you know more about
I'll walk you through a new resident
process?
coming in during the summer, because then they're all handled at the district office. We require them to provide proof of the sale of the house, and not just that there's an occupancy permit and that there's actually a date of sale. We often ask for documentation from the moving company so that they've demonstrated they've moved from point A to point B. We ask for verification that they have signed up for utilities, and that's all done by email now, so it's very easy to forward an email saying ComEd is hooking up the utilities as of this date. So we tend to drill down, and it may not be all documented, but this is the process we go through until we feel comfortable that the person walking through that door has the proper paperwork and documentation to attend our schools. I think if we have to improve what we do, it's the individuals who are currently here who have leases and affidavits, and that we need to make sure that we have certified leases with signatures on them. We need to, and frankly, I would prefer to have them notarized. I think we need to make sure that we have current utility bills or current mail that comes to that address for them. We often ask for copies of rent payments. So it gets to be August and somebody's coming in and saying they live with a lease. Where's the canceled check for the rent payment? So we do drill down, and I think we ask for documents that make us comfortable, at least in the business office, for that they're actually residents of our community.
And
Becky,
that's
with
what-
you, I'm sorry, okay, go ahead.
And that's where I think Scott brought up a good point, because you're the central office. I feel confident that you are doing those things. What's happening at the school levels, in particular in the grammar schools?
Well, I just leaned over to Brian and I said, the next secretary's meeting, you and I are going to have to go, and we're going to have to drill this point home to them. And we've often said over the last several years that new registrations, we don't want you to be the bad guy asking us for all these documents. Send them to the central office. That's what we're here for. If there's somebody who's got to be the good cop or the bad cop in this situation, let it be us. You have to develop those relationships with those parents. But bless those building secretaries. They want to handle everything on their own over there. We're just going to have to drill down the point that we're here from the central office and we're here to help you.
But they have been trained, Becky. I don't want
They
anybody
have
to
been trained.
think that they
Right.
don't know exactly what to look for, that there isn't a checklist that they follow that is pretty standardized, again, against, school district to school district.
But you get overly busy.
Right, and if they have questions, that's when they kick it. But looking at it in totality as they move through it, they do hundreds of these. They're all pretty good at it, and they're trained and retrained on an annual basis.
Where we need to improve is with the leases and the affidavits.
Becky, your comments lead me to two observations. One, it sounds as if the process can be quite thorough on your end of the business office. However, you mentioned that it may not be written down. And, frankly, that's a problem. And I think that it needs to be very clearly delineated and the something to the effect that the materials required but are not limited to blah, 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 whatever. But this has to be very well known by all parties involved and no equivocation involved. It has to be known. And I think that's a task that has to be done going forward.
We have a list that gives them options, and it's a variety of things from each of the 2 categories, so it is clear. I'll attach a copy of that list to my Friday memo to you guys, so you can see how well delineated it is.
Yeah, I'd like to see it
Is that an
because.
official procedural thing, or it's certainly not a policy, right?
No, there's an
No,
administrative
there's a
procedure that,
but not
right.
a policy. Yeah.
Right, so I'd like to see it.
And I do think
I
there's
was
a
going off of
benefit,
what Becky was saying.
Admin
And the
procedure.
second observation that I have is, obviously, this is important to the board level.
Absolutely.
And we are
As it should be.
directing Dr. Heinz to carry this out, so I suspect that there will be some movement on your end to make certain that at the building level, this is getting done.
Yep, I'm adding it to our next secretarial agenda.
Thank you. Vicki, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I remember when you have a kindergarten student, you get a packet, you know, and in the packet, it says you have to bring in some utility
Right.
bills
Exactly.
and things like that, so.
Okay.
I just have, you know, some of the fears that, are they looking for, you know, I don't have a mailbox, I have a PO box, you know, red
Those are the
red
things that
flags.
we,
I would
those
call
are the red flags, absolutely.
And as a follow-up, Becky, as Vicki mentioned, so when someone is enrolling someone in kindergarten, they register. If they already have another child, an older child in the district, do they have to do that same process?
If they own their home, then we only require current utility bills. If they're on a lease, then we will
I guess my
mark them
question,
in Power School, so when the lease comes for renewal, that we actually look at that again.
so we are doing some checking. If someone, say, a family has a second grader and then they're enrolling a kindergartner, we are asking for, we're not just saying, okay, you're in.
No,
already
we ask for
You're
paper.
asking
So
for
then,
category.
I guess my, just to sort of think about this in terms of numbers, so how many families are there in the district?
Just
just got
over
a round
3,000,
number.
right, Brian? Just about 3,000.
Okay, so just over
families,
3,000.
4,500 kids.
So it sounds like then between the people who are renting, which I think is 364, as well as the expected incoming kindergarten students, that's 788 that would already have to do this. So then it's just the remaining that we're sort of asking.
3,300 or so, 3,400.
Yeah, so you're asking, not every we've already got 700 and some students that this would be required for, or families about. So I think just from a, talking about what are people doing and everything, and what sort of burden are we putting on, there's already a good percentage that would have had to do this anyway, right?
So it's 2,300 families.
Right. Hey, if you had a kid in 207, you're doing it every year, so.
Now, getting down to the nuts and bolts of this, are we suggesting that this is a drop-off? I mean, what method are we going to choose here? It's going to be a mail-in, because that was one question. Could we mail in the stuff? Can it be a drop-off, just a big U.S. mail bucket and people drop stuff off? You have to bring it to the office? What process will be involved with this?
Well, option C was written to be a drop-off, but if we're really going to do this and we're going to do it right, I don't think drop-off is what I'm the most comfortable with.
Right.
I like intervals and having people interface with other people, hand the documents, complete the checklist, and verify at that moment. And then if there's a discrepancy or incomplete paperwork, they're sent to the district office for affidavits or residency situations that are trickier. Because some are very black and white. They have all the right paperwork, all the right proof, and they're good to go. So we might be potentially modifying option C
Yeah, I guess a
to
question.
not be just paperwork.
Are you planning to ask for copies of documents, or are you planning to ask for originals of documents? Like, if I'm a homeowner, do I need to give you my original copy of my tax bill? Or am I going to Xerox my tax bill and give you a copy?
I would take a copy because it indicates your PIN.
Okay,
We can check
then
with
my
them.
suggestion would be, if you were going to take copies from people, why do they need to stand in line and command the attention of a district employee in real time? why can't I put my copy of my tax bill along with my registration form in an envelope, get it to you by a particular day, and if you have a problem with it, you can call me.
I agree. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Lori, but I think from an implementation perspective, and when you think about disruptions inside the school building and everything, I think whether it's delivered through your child, delivered through the mail method would be much better. And I can't see why, original documents, I don't see a need for that.
What do you guys, I mean, you've done this in the district for a while, the drop-off, people opening papers at a later time when they're coming in,
When
they're
I've
stacking
done
up.
district-wide enrollment verifications, we had people come in. I think it's the preference of this district as to what they want. I would prefer that people got through lines, you had it staffed well enough, that you had enough stations where people weren't, and you did it on multiple days or evenings where the backups wouldn't be as bad as we might
So
anticipate.
it's taking the plan of option A, how the flow-through would work, and just putting it to C in terms of the volume of people, the number of people.
Let me ask one more question.
And is that a decision really that the board wants or needs to make, or is that something that you can leave to us?
Well, let me ask just one more question about this. I think last meeting when we hit this point, I asked the question of, can somebody check with District 207 to see what they do? Because my recollection is that, well, it's not only drop-off, but it's drop-off/mail-in. Like a human does not need to appear on District 207 property to hand it to them in the office.
And there's no checking of the documents.
Right, they don't check while I stand there. I think my usual practice is to fill it out and either hand it to my kid or mail it. And so am I wrong about that? Did you guys have a chance to check with 207?
Yeah, Ken said it's a drop-off, there's boxes around, he did not say that people mail them in, when I talked to Dr.
Okay.
Walls. He said there's drop-off bins, but,
Because I guess my one point is I don't see any reason why you need to be more burdensome than 207 is being.
I agree, and I think there's just the whole security issue and everything then of people entering, 2,000 people entering our school building that
Well,
we're
we
not
would-
used to today.
yeah, standard.
I mean, so I think, I think use the children as the ferries to bring them in, let somebody mail it in. And I just think the hassle factor, if you ask people to wait in lines, you want to talk about a way to tick people off and everything. I think because you just couldn't control how many people show up on a given time period in a short
I mean,
period of time.
kindergarten registration and new student registration recently, and you saw my numbers from my Friday memo. They moved through a large number of folks, and they were live with their paperwork and their registration documents, and it flowed pretty nicely.
Eight times that amount, though.
There is a system, but we have a 2-week window, and we would be staggering,
True.
times, and we could work out a schedule.
I mean, how I see it is, right, I mean, the board wants to give you the direction, at least the majority of the board, that we want to get 100%
Check 'em off.
of verification. I think the process that gets in place, I mean,
So I
I think that's glory for you to decide. That's where I'm at.
Although I can, certainly, we don't want to make this too burdensome or too onerous. And we've got at least a few folks who think that drop-off would be sufficient. I'm in that group as well. Certainly, however you work it, I mean, one of the items of dropping it off would certainly be to help control the cost of this whole process. But that's one of the reasons I'm in favor of. I think it could be just as effective and yet less costful to do it that way. One of the things I was thinking about with the drop-off, though, is a memorandum by Becky, who mentioned there has to be something given to parents, some sort of code or number, the info site, online registration. And when does that have to be given out to families? By what time frame?
I would defer to Bernadette or sometime this spring.
In the spring.
And
So we would have this check. I mean, this is really the biggest issue. I mean, if we do the check in spring, school doesn't start, we would have to rely very heavily on the building folks to make sure this group has already been cleared. These are the outliers. We have to go back and reevaluate those folks.
And that's how we build classes and how we know who's coming. So we want it done sooner than later, so we know from a RIF perspective if we're getting rid of teachers, if we're riffing them, if we're opening new sections, So there is a timeliness to this that is important in terms of us being able to appropriately staff for the 15-16 school year.
So we would arguably determine our cutoff date and then go backwards 2 weeks and have this process going up to that cutoff date. All righty, so now we're up to making a motion. Dan?
Make a motion.
So I kind
Oh,
of,
before we do that, Joan, do you have any further things to add now that we've had this? So I open up for public comment.
I think it's a fair compromise to do everybody this first year, see what happens, and then determine whether it needs to be done yearly, or if you can do kindergarten through sixth. That's a great idea, and I think that would be a good start. And as I say, there's some concern I have about the tax bill requirement, in that I think 207 does indeed ask for showing the homeowner exemption, because you can have a tax bill for a property that you own as an investment, and you could live someplace else. So I think it's key that it have the homeowner exemption. And actually, people should thank you for making them get it, because it will save them a little money. So it shouldn't be a hardship. I think you probably could get some volunteers to help sort through paperwork if you were so inclined. I know I said to Becky after the last meeting, I would certainly be happy to volunteer some time to help with this if need be, and I'm sure there are others in the community in the interest of moving things along who would do so as well. So I think if you decide to go through with this, thank you very much.
Okay. Now, Danny, I promise this will be no interruptions.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the residency re-verification requiring 100% of District 64 students' residency to be verified on an annual basis.
I second.
Second opens up for discussion. Did you want to make that motion on an annual basis ongoing, or just for the next year?
On an annual, ongoing basis, every year.
Well, I thought we had
We can change that in
Almost
the
doesn't
future.
matter, because we can always come back and
Right.
change it after the first year. And we could set it up that it's annual, and then we can come back afterwards.
I don't
and say,
think there's a
we want to."
material difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
Is there, as long as everybody's okay with that?
It
All
just
right.
means that if somebody ever wants to change it in the future, they'll have to make another motion, but
Right.
that's no big deal.
Okay. We have a second, so why don't we start with Dan?
Yes.
Aye.
Nay.
Yes.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, we have a new policy. Next item is the adoption of the resolution number 1133, Chief School Business Official under direct supervision of the superintendent, begin preparation of a tentative budget for the 15-16 fiscal year in accordance with Board Policy 410, Fiscal and Business Management in the Illinois School Code 105 Illinois Compiled Statutes 5/17-1. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the second note underneath that on page 32, I guess it is, where it says the education, the operations and maintenance fund budgets will be prepared with a 0% increase in the area of purchase services, supplies, and capital outlay. And I guess my question there is I believe our financial planning that we just looked at was projecting that we would have a increase at the rate of inflation. So I'm wondering why this is saying a 0% increase.
Well, this is all typical line items. That variance gives us the ability to add additional costs or take into consideration where licenses are going up, but to look at actual costs. But the premise is that we'll apply a 0% increase to most of the line items.
I guess I'm not following as well. So what?
There are some items that we have absolutely no control over in these particular areas, in purchase services, supplies, or capital outlay. Some of those costs will go up regardless if we say 0% increases, and we analyze those as we prepare the budget.
So why do we say this in here then? Why do we say 0% increase?
It's a directive to the budget makers who prepare their budget. And then they have to argue and defend any increases above and beyond that. You can take that out, but that's a standard statement that's been in there for years.
I don't know what anybody else thinks.
I think it clarifies that there is a very, very small segment of the budget that is amenable to change by the board.
Reading through this, the only thing I wanted to add in there was in the beginning of the budgetary process, I'm sorry, Bob, I got tied up on this high-tech stuff here, was in the process, just to make it certain that as you begin the budgetary process, and you may have already said this, to look for things, look for ways, look for avenues. Is that the gist of what you were?
That is something that we do as we build the budget, so I would expect that process to continue.
And I think this year there's probably just a heightened sense of urgency.
Every year there's a heightened sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Hey, Becky, in the budget calendar that we have that just lists the dates of board meetings and actions, for the one in September 28th of 2015, I think we just want to modify the line there that says conduct a public hearing on the, I think it should be 2015,
15, 16, thank you very much.
Any other questions regarding this? Further discussion? Not seeing any, will there be a motion?
Sure. I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, adopt resolution number 1133, directing the chief school business official, under the direct supervision of the superintendent, to begin preparation of a tentative budget for the 2015-16 fiscal year in accordance with Board Policy 410, titled Fiscal and Business Management, and in accordance with the Illinois School Code 105, Illinois Compiled Statutes 5/17-1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Let's start on Bob's side.
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's backing up on our computers here to the recommended staffing plan. Dr. Hines?
Joel and Becky are coming up, and they will present a draft plan to you in just a moment.
Seems like we were just here.
Reinforcements.
Yeah. People who can explain some things in their departments a little better than I can. Well, thank you for having us back.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. So I'll go through this, and obviously you've heard some of this already, but I'll, for the sake of being thorough, we'll go over in the fact of saying when we look at our staffing, we roll our numbers up. We begin by rolling, as Becky talked about earlier. We look at what sections where we're losing staff or sections we're going down. So I'm kind of going through the staffing with the bubbles, and I'm also adding that into the chart that Becky put together and setting through and going through. So if you look, we're looking at being down 3 sections at the K through 8 as far as reductions, so we're looking at 3 less sections. Now I'm going to add a little into this. Typically, when you see this, that might automatically to the board mean riffing of staff or reduction in force. That may or may not happen, or the numbers may be different when we actually come to do that at the board in the March or April meeting. Factors that enter into that are retirements, people who are on leaves that are coming back. So that number may look different one way or another when we come to the fact of taking into account all of those factors as we move forward. But we look at being down 3 sections currently. If I'm jumping down to the bottom, and I'm going to skip the middle for just a moment, we also are looking at 7 bubble sections. So as Becky talked about earlier, these are sections that are within 2 of being under our guidelines of how we have added staff historically. These means that, you know, if we were to add 2 students in these classes, we would pop a bubble, as we call it, and add a teacher. That does not mean this is going to happen, but these are the contingencies or the numbers that we are looking at. Again, as Becky has pointed out, it may or may not, so we're going to lose 3. If we were to pop 3 bubbles, we're back at 0. If we go above that, anything would be in addition to what we currently have. And that's all unknown as far as moving forward.
Joel, I have one quick question.
Sure.
Carpenter, 2nd grade, is that, I don't understand why that has a bubble when the 75 in 4th grade does not have a bubble.
Class size guidelines change, if
Pardon
I'm
me?
not
It's a-
mistaken.
More,
That's
more,
class
more,
size.
more kids in the
Yeah.
class, yeah,
You're allowed to.
more kids in class. Regarding the district technologist,
Yeah.
could you tell me how many folks we have now? And if we can, I mean, what is used to determine the necessity for increased, another district technologist?
MJ, do you want to, or do you want me to start?
There's one building technologist at each of the buildings. And with the tripling of our devices, there's been, and as well, with going one-to-one, there's been an increased demand and attention to maintain, upkeep, address all the issues that get reported. Between our middle schools alone, and our middle schools have the largest buildings, they've seen over 1,000 new incidences in the last 4 or 5 months. Those are the numbers that we've been gathering. So with that, though, they also see students now on a regular basis because they're now active users as opposed to scheduled users, which is what we were before the one-to-one. So this request was on a district level where this role would be able to support all the buildings as needed on a more dynamic basis. And then as well, just to provide summer ramp-up support so that we can ready devices each year as they come. This is also in anticipation with growing our one-to-one iPads in the kindergarten through 2nd grade, so that's even more devices.
Is there any possibility of, rather than getting an extra floating technologist district-wide, to get other avenues of support to handle this increased influx on a daily basis in the buildings?
So this isn't a floating technologist. This would be another district employee to work with Lucas and you and Janice, really, correct?
Yeah, but as
And
well.
then out in the schools doing.
Yeah, to be going out to the schools and addressing whatever device issues that might occur. We have centralized all of our ticket system so that this person would be strategically going around to each of the buildings as needed where the issues are. To further address those issues while trying to remain, within trying to remain as staff neutral as possible. Are you referring to outsourcing, or are you referring to?
No, I think that there is potentially other avenues. I mean, you probably have a list, top 10 reasons why people have to contact the technologist, and maybe numbers 8, 9, and 10 are relatively mundane that can be handled in a different fashion. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I don't know if these issues have been prioritized, if they've been determined what is important, what isn't not important, what can be dealt with only by a technologist. And then when you carve that out, then you can see an assessment of the necessity for hiring another individual, or if we can farm out some of these other things to maybe classroom teachers can be better trained to handle things. Again, I don't know. Maybe there's somebody else in the building that could be trained to handle some of these relatively minor things. Again, trained is the word, because I'm the worst one when it comes to
Right.
this. But that's what I'm asking.
So is the sort of today then, would you say, I mean, I realize we're in the first year of our one-to-one initiative rollout, so is it really that we're sort of resource constrained right now with being able to provide what we would believe would be the right service level for the technology?
Oh, for sure.
We have a very, I would say, a small staff for the number of devices and the number of student users as well as teacher users. And when we track, the HAPARA and the SAM-Manage rather tickets and things that are happening, it's just really hard for the crew that we have to do the effective job that we need them to do in managing this department.
My one question, when we adopted one-to-one, I think we kind of knew this was lurking around the corner, right? Because you're introducing just so many devices. So I don't think this is a surprise. I think what's a surprise to me may be that it's one. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that this is one this year and one next year and one the next year? Or do you think now that you've got 4 or 5 months under your belt, this is one and will be stable, considering the devices should remain relatively stable going forward? I realize we'll introduce a handful of new iPads, and this person's supposed to address that. Do you think that next year it's zero? It's just, I think we've settled and this is where we'll be.
I think that's our aim. I think that's our aim, to have one additional 12-month district technologist that would put under the bailiwick just desktop management and one-to-one management.
MJ
So-
right now is looking at that department, her department, now that she's 7 months in, to say, do we have all the efficiencies? Do we have everybody doing the right job? If we are approved this additional technologist, we'll continue to kind of reshuffle and really try to look to maximize, obviously, everybody's workload. But we have a lot to do, and a very slim crew, based on the fact that we infuse the district with a total of 4,500 devices.
And we are looking to build in more centralized efficiencies, because at this point, right now, up until this point, buildings were running as they were kind of in their own silos, because they just had to manage that number of devices and users, and that was what they could handle. So we're seeing an opportunity here to kind of build in some more central efficiencies, and then to address the increase of demand for tech issues that really teachers would not have time during the day, or other folks would not necessarily have time during the day to spend the kind of attention that they might.
When I said teachers, I just
Yeah,
threw that
I
out.
mean, anyone,
Anybody.
anyone in the buildings.
Yeah, anybody.
So.
I think that I'm not so sure, right, I am so sure that the need has increased. I am not so sure that hiring one individual is the way to go, much less 3 years from now when the need might be even greater. So I think this is a perfect example of thinking outside the box. We have to find other ways to provide support, whether it's dedicated support after school, or whether it's before school, or whether it's something to handle increased tasks with fewer individuals. Because, didn't we just talk about that with this budget and the projections and the increasing expenses? I think this is, in my mind, this is one example of a way where, we need to think outside the box. So.
And I agree that we need to look for additional efficiencies. I just don't know that we can afford to look any more deeply at tech. I think this is an area where, based on where we are now and where we're going to be in the future, this is critical. We'll look with a very strong lens in other ways, other areas. but I just don't think we can do what we need to do moving forward without adding one person to this department. Got a lot to do, right?
One other question here, and I apologize, I had to step out for just 1 minute, but if I recall the last year or two, rather than just okaying the bubble teachers now, we directed you to bring the bubble teachers to us when the time arose. And I didn't think, from my perspective, that seemed like a bad way to go, but maybe that created ridiculous amounts of work that I was unaware of. But I kind of liked it, having done it one way for a couple of years, and then more of a, instead of a carte blanche, you got up to 7, it was more of a, why don't we get closer to, and I know you want to hire, I get that, but I just wondered if we should get closer to it like we did in
Well,
years past, or.
I'm not going to disagree with you, nor would I ever say that it's not the board's discretion to say, okay.
Sure.
I will simply say that I think, and I will speak from the building principal perspective as well, that when this gets into the summer, days seem like weeks for hiring, because you're in competition for staff that, all the other districts. And so there's a good chance one day may make the difference between getting the best candidate and the second best candidate. And I know maybe there's 2 principals in the room, and why that Laura used to be one. But I think time is of the essence during the summer in hiring. I would simply say that, and I guess it would be the turnaround time that I would ask on what that is for approval. And Scott, I honestly can't remember how we did it, and I'm just blanking. I apologize for that. If it was Laura or Phil would call up with somebody and just get it back. I don't recall if it was turnaround, but that's the only thing I would be cognizant about, that if that were the direction the board would want to go, please be aware of the fact that during the summer, time is of the essence in hiring.
I have 2 thoughts regarding that. The first one would be, historically, of these suspected bubble classes, how many of those are actually come to fruition? 50%? So if you suspect there's 7 now in August, does it really mean 7? I mean, historically, what's the number? How does it work out? Is it usually if you guess 7, 5 come up? Or?
I think it goes from year to year. Because, for example, sometimes they materialize, and there have been, I can speak, for example, I know, I think it was 2 years ago, where I know that sitting with Dr. Dwyer, we thought for sure we were going to get some kids at Grail, and it didn't happen. And then they popped up at Field. And what I mean by, to say, or for me to sit there, I'd have to go back and crunch the numbers to really look at the specifics of which bubbles popped into what percentage. Do we historically get bubbles that pop every year? Yes.
But
we
not
do.
all of them.
Yeah,
No,
the problem
not
is
always
that
all of them.
that's not predictive. Even if you did get a certain percentile, that has no bearing whatsoever on the percentile that's going to pop this year.
Well, it doesn't, but if you have 7 and usually it's 3 or 4, then you can bring that number down to 3 or 4, because that leads into the second aspect. If we arguably approve 770, does that go into the budget as 7? Or can, like Scott say, can we recuse that 7 and then add it later on an as-needed basis?
I would take you back to the budget calendar. The last tentative draft that you will look at is when you adopt the tentative budget at the beginning of August, and then it's from there to budget adoption at the end of September. There won't be a lot of room in there for adjustments. So I think to not include some of those bubble classrooms in the building of the budget, whether you spend the money or not, would not be advisable.
Becky, if I remember right from previous years, in the tentative budgets, you include those bubble classrooms in your budget.
Correct.
On the day we approve it in September, don't you by that point, haven't you brought the number of teachers down to the actual number at that point?
There is a scheduling issue this year with doing a budget presentation in September.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure that flexibility is there this year, but yes, typically we would have done something like that.
Typically, too. I guess my reaction to all of this is, in some ways, we're talking about this like we have control over it, when in fact we don't. Right now, we have a policy that says it's going to work a certain way, and Becky can put any number she wants in the budget, and it's still going to work the way it works. So she can put -10 teachers in the budget, and we're still gonna hire those teachers, which is gonna go over budget. Or we can put 100 teachers in, and Becky can announce, or her successor can announce, great news, we're way under. I think if the board is uncomfortable, and we've always been at least mildly uncomfortable with this policy ever since I've been on the board. If the board's uncomfortable with it, we ought to think about changing it. And, and changing it doesn't need to mean increasing class sizes. It could just mean changing the mechanism. One possible way of doing it is that the board could say, come June 1st, we will lock in stone the number of teachers we will hire at that point. Maybe we'll add in a little bit of cushion for where we are at that point, but we'll lock them in. Lori will have a certain number she's allowed to hire, and and she'll use her judgment as to which classes get those teachers, regardless of how the numbers shake out. That to me, that strikes me as a reasonable, more predictable way of budgeting and of hiring teachers than the way we've got right now. Because I've never been a fan of the idea of scrambling around on August 20th, looking for a teacher to start 2 days later.
Isn't that what we kind of did this year? Didn't we have somebody presented themselves right before the school year?
Second grade
You
at
do it
Franklin.
every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Every year
I
it's
mean,
happened pretty
so I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's, if it's really feasible to say that board approval would be necessary because we feasibly can't meet fast enough to approve a situation like that where, I know you're talking about in the summertime it could be hard, but if in the, late summer we're presented with that a couple of days before school opens, I mean, how are we gonna, we would definitely cause more problems probably, but I guess the board's also just concerned about, I think as you'd mentioned earlier, John, that these are guidelines, right? These aren't set in stone in terms of the class size. So it's not that we have to hire another teacher, but it seems like it's been a general consensus that that's an appropriate number for maximum number for a classroom.
Yeah, and I'm not interested in changing the overall number, but, I mean, if I were gonna do something to this, what I might do is I would change the way we do things in this district, so that on or about June 1st, we set a projection as to the way we think this system's gonna shake out. And the board approves that number at the late May or the early June meeting, and that's the number. And the superintendent can allocate those people, however she sees fit. Might be what I would do.
So John, I like your thought of getting the teachers in place ahead of time. I guess my only question with that would be, and a large concern I've had, and I've always said that, to me, I don't ever want to increase any of the class sizes beyond this. Now, it's debatable amongst the group, your different views on it. I know everyone doesn't share my view, but that's my view. So I guess my only question would be, what happens if we decide, all right, there's going to be one second grade class that's going to have, the maximum class size today is 24. Well, they're going to have 25. Are we just all going to say, well, we're going to live with that? Because I'm not. I mean, I'm not at that spot. That's one board member, but I'm not for increasing class sizes. To me, this is black and white. This is what I think we've made a commitment to the community on. Other people can debate that, and maybe it's not in writing. I get it. It's just in my own mind. I don't want to go beyond these class sizes. Now, if we can get to a plan where we can stay committed to that, I'm for it, but I do not want to go beyond it.
And I don't either, except that, for me, I'm not sure whether it's the maximum class size or the average class size I care about. I don't want to see our classes in general get bigger, but I guess I'm not wedded to it working exactly this way. The other suggestion I might make is that what you might do is you might lock in authority for maybe a teacher more than the model says you're going to need, so that you have a teacher if somebody shows up on August 20th. It may just mean that Lori has to move the teacher from Roosevelt second grade to Franklin fourth grade in order to keep that class from going over the maximum size. I don't have it all worked out in my mind, but to me, at least the idea I would pitch would be certainty, as opposed to always being at the whim of somebody who, drops off that last registration. the day beforehand.
I like certainty. No, I mean sincerely.
So do
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
sort of the principals, the lesson teachers, I mean, they would rather have that level of certainty and not that nail biting that goes on in August with the principals as they watch people continue to enroll.
How do they do this in other districts? Is this common practice?
As far as how we hire?
This whole bubble process, and it's very standard?
Yes and no. I mean, everybody has.
You're on.
How about now? And what I mean by that is what you will find a variance. A lot of districts, and I know Dr. Bender talked about this in the previous, that some districts will do, they wait till the kid walks through the door to hire. Some will do the what we do, where it is when we go over, we hire. And some will do the I don't want to be hiring a class in 2 weeks or a week before August, because you know what, that creates a chaos that I don't want to deal with. So if we're within a kid or two, at a certain point, we're adding the teacher regardless. Because some of them look at the fact that it's kind of like Bob said, 3 days before school, if that student comes, there is just chaos that getting the redoing schedules, getting that staff hired, informing parents who've maybe already got class assignments, all of that comes down. So some districts will say at a certain point, if we're within, it's a discretion of the superintendent, consulting with the board to say, we're going to go forward because we think we're going to get this, we don't want to risk it. As I said, some will do that. Some will say, we'll see the whites of their eyes. Some do exactly what we do. There's no perfect system, but I think that what you will find across the board is something close to what we do. My only take on it would be somewhat to what John says, that they may have a little different mechanism of that sets the trigger of when that goes. But I would say the majority of them go where the classes go over and they add the teacher as we do. The other difference might be, as I said, but to go back to it, is the when. August becomes where we will do it right up to the school year. That variance within how close to school we add a teacher, that really does differ from district to district.
Joel, I remember in a prior conversation about a year and a half ago when we had this discussion with Dr. Bender, and the way that we currently work, I believe, is right up to the start of school. If we are over, we'll get another staff member in. If it's after the start of school, we'll go to the PREA and to have that extra child in that class without bumping up another teacher. And I think it comes down to when. And what was brought out in the conversation that we had previously was that we are one of the few districts in the area that has a hard and fast number. And from what I recall, our district and one other district were hard and fast, and yet all other districts had some flexibility built into their scheduling. And I can't recall exactly how that flexibility took shape, but I don't know if that's something where we need to evolve.
I don't recall it, and I'm not disputing, I don't recall the conversation, but I think some of the flexibility, like I said, is what I talked about. I know some districts in particular will not wait for that number. They will make a move prior if they believe they're within one or two students in a certain time before school starts. I think that would probably be the flexibility that you're talking about, because otherwise I think that's really the two options that people have.
It was something else.
There are some districts who make their staff guidelines contingent on the district's average per grade level, or may average, in Palatine 15, when I was there before I came here, we averaged 2 grade levels together, and the class sizes. So we would average grades 1 and 2 to make sure that we averaged 24 on a district-wide basis. We didn't look at it building by building. We looked at it more as a district aggregate. So there are other methodologies, but it truly depends on your district and what your past practice has been.
Because let me just give you a scenario, but I think it'll go to Dan's point, and I'm not advocating for or against, I'm simply pointing out. If your class size guideline at the middle school is 28, where you're saying we want a max class sizes of 28, and you were to change it, for example, to something where we're going to go, currently when we have everything is at 28 and we add the next kid, we add a section. If you were to change that and say, hey, we're going to go, where it's one across, where everybody has to be one over, for example, and I know that's been brought up in past discussions. In essence, you have changed your class size guideline. Because at that point, if you were to add 6 kids in an 8-section or 10-section, you now, and you don't add the rest of those kids, you have set the class size guidelines for the start of that year in at least 5 of those homerooms at 29.
And that's the kind of thing that I'm not interested in doing. I'm
Right.
not interested in doing a gimmick that just kind of, you know, quietly increases the
Right,
class
and I
size.
just was pointing that out as one of those that.
But what I might do is, you know, in 8th grade, I might say, okay, the reason we have a max class size of 28 is that we're really looking for an average class size of 24 or 25. So I might say, how many 8th graders do we have all across the district? Divided by 24 and 25 and say, that's the number of 8th grade teachers we ought to have. And then get that number of 8th grade teachers. And if we get a couple more 8th graders, that's not really going to disturb that much. And you get your certainty, you get the same average class size as you're used to, more or less. And you work it that way rather than always being driven by these maximums. So something like that. And I apologize, I'm getting us a little bit off track with the staffing plan. My sense personally is the staffing plan's probably just fine. But suffice to say that, you know, between now and May 4th, anybody felt like coming back and asking to switch the system, I'd be happy to help.
I
Right.
have a note that we can look at.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that we will definitely look
Other
at and
ways
see
in
if there's a
which
better
it's
way
done.
we think we can come up with. But going back, we do have a couple other, if you want me to continue through the other ones, sorry about that, I know we've gotten off. We are looking to add one English learning teacher. I don't know if Jane wants to say anything about that.
I think we've said a lot already about that.
Okay, and then we would be looking at eliminating 2 positions for next year, a resource teacher based on student enrollment and a first-year program elimination at the Jefferson Kindergarten. That, if I can paraphrase, we find or believe that we can just service the students better in a different model.
A model of having them in their home schools.
So if you look at, if you were to take out the enrollment simply based, or the staffing simply based on enrollment with the 3 and the 7 at the bottom, you would see that we are looking at adding 2 and taking away 2. So that would be a neutral staff, just looking at the middle of the student learning support and the technology. Then obviously that part is, that's what we're asking for and what we, outside of enrollment. And then if you look at the enrollment, we would be going down 3 with the possibility then, if those bubbles were to burst, if we were under the current system of those 7 plus the additional for the specials.
Where's the English learning teacher going to be at Porter?
They are split between buildings quite a bit already, and we're losing a lot in travel time. But we don't make their assignments final until we've actually counted students in September. So we'll wait and get the exact number of students with needs in each of the buildings. And we do have buildings already, Fields an example, that need more than 1 teacher. And then we would have Lincoln that doesn't need a whole teacher. So it's kind of a parceling out of 1 plus at one place and less than 1 at another. But we'll wait until about 30 days into finalizing the fall, because that's when we'll know the number of students in each building that need services.
And how many do we have today? How many English learning
6.
teachers? So pretty spread across the schools.
There's 6 are trying to service 7 sites.
Your special classes, do they have a head count recommendation? You want to have an art, PE, music, foreign language, you want to add some teachers there?
Well, that would be only if we
If
were to
sections.
increase sections and go up to the,
So if you get the bubble pop,
then we have to,
you have to add.
We
You
have
have to
no
have
choice
it.
but to
yeah.
offer them their fine arts block, which is contractual, because it equates to teacher planning, and then plus it's part of the educational kind of offerings.
They go hand in hand. Okay.
Guess a couple of questions on specials and on teacher assistants. I don't see any specials reductions funds to accompany the 3 FTEs that currently you'd be losing.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Originally, we had that. The thing is, we every year eliminate our part-time employees, or I shouldn't say we eliminate, we RIF them regardless because we cannot guarantee what their percentages will be the following year. Looking at our current percentages, well, based on our current system, we feel pretty sure that those people would just not be, so we would follow our current procedure, and for example, somebody was a 0.5 PE, we just may not be bringing them back, but that's a yearly event regardless.
And that was where I was driving. So even if it's not on the staffing report, you do plan to watch that?
Yes.
Yes.
And then I guess the similar question with teacher assistants, my understanding is that TAs in large part are driven by the IEP caseload that we have and the particular needs of particular students. I don't see any projection of either additions or subtractions for them, but I assume you are going to look at that closely, and if there need to be additions, you'll hire them, and if there need to be subtractions, you'll lift them.
To get ready for that eventual decision, I've started to draft a rubric system that determines how they're more specifically allocated. It's a large number, it's 85 teaching assistants, and they are not all assigned to specific students through IEPs. Majority are not. And I didn't, when I arrived, find a particular allotment methodology, like you have a class size methodology. And so we're getting ready to pilot and then eventually implement a system so that it would be easier to determine. And then we could also be sure of equity so that all 5 elementary schools use the same rubric to allocate, and there would be fairness across the buildings. Since I'm just beginning to pilot it, we've tried it in about 4 schools to see what its impact. I don't know yet where the structure will take us. My goal is to be as thrifty as possible, but it's a balancing act, and first I'm giving it structure.
And with that group, John, as you may recall, we RIF our first year TAs every year, and then have the option with that group of bringing back if we need or not, but that gives us the built-in flexibility.
Good, thanks.
Any other comments? And not hearing any, why don't we move on to consent agenda? So next time you'll bring that, Joel, you'll be bringing the staffing report back for approval next time, right? Any questions or comments about the consent agenda?
Yeah, I just had a question, Becky, I'm sorry. This Constellation Energy that we use, which I assume is like electric or gas or whatever.
It's actually both.
Okay.
They're a third-party consultant to help us in our purchasing.
Okay, so I was just curious if that's something that we sort of source independently, that we're not following. I know there's been some recent discussion, the city of Park Ridge might be looking at moving back to ComEd maybe, those pricing things have changed. So I was just curious how that.
We use Constellation. We negotiated a contract, I believe it was 2 years ago. They will have to be doing that in the fall of this year to either continue with Constellation and or select a new third-party administrator, but that evaluation will take place in the fall. They've done a very good job for us monitoring and only purchasing what utility we actually needed.
Okay. And is the invoice for Nicholas and Associates, it's over $100,000, is that just part of
If you'll
stuff we had already agreed to?
If you'll recall on that list, when we reported, I believe it was in December, where it totaled about $300,000. Sometimes they had signed the actual contracts for those particular services. We were just reimbursing Nicholas for those costs. They were included in that December memorandum, though.
Okay. And there's an item listed on here, a vendor Septran, and it says tuition. Is that really tuition, or is that?
No, it's transportation of our
provided?
special needs students.
Okay. So that's just something maybe we just need to
Correct.
modify in the system. Okay.
Becky, in the personnel report, I noticed that we have some 12-month employees serving as principals for the summer school.
Correct.
I don't, and they're going to be paid a salary for the summer school, but aren't they already getting a salary for 12-month positions?
They don't get additional compensation if they are a 12-month assistant principal.
So they're taking on extra duties for the same amount of money, is
Correct.
basically.
Right.
Okay.
Isn't it part of their job description?
During the summer, just assistant principal,
But there's no additional compensation.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, we'll need a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda of February 9, 2015, which includes the personnel report, bills, and amendment to shorten the chief school business official's contract by 2 days, and corresponding salary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Bob?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
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 All righty. Board member liaison reports?
Vicki, do you want to do L, or do you want me to do it? Okay. Well, the Educational Learning Foundation did another wonderful casino night. It's my first one, but it was outstanding, and from everything that was shared, each year it seems to get a little bit bigger, a little bit better. It was great to see so many staff members participating in the event, selling raffles, dealing cards, and so on and so forth. I saw a number of board members and was actually able to interact with a lot of families, so it was a nice event. We're still waiting on figures in terms of the profits that were made through casino night, so hopefully after our next meeting, which is coming up, at our next board meeting, then I can report the results. At that point also, Whole Foods, if you remember, they had a 5% day for us. They presented a big check for around $3,300 just for local residents shopping at Whole Foods. So it was a really nice event, and I would say the one thing they're thinking about is if they're going to continue casino night on a yearly basis, or if they're going to go to every other year and try to mix it up moving forward. So that'll be something to watch for. But I think all in all, just a great event.
Okay.
Maybe this might be a decent place to add it. Laura, were you going to say anything about the strategic planning meeting on Saturday?
In my other discussion and
Okay.
items right now, yeah.
Excellent.
Yes. And what was not on our board packet electronically, but on the piece of paper is other discussions and items of information. And that is to include the school closing issue, CEC, and strategic plan.
Yeah, a bunch of topics. So a couple of things. So just for everyone's awareness, there is something that exists. It's a Maine Township emergency school closing procedures that is given to all superintendents in Maine Township. And it really does serve as the first place that we look in terms of guidelines for closing schools and who to contact and so on and so forth. So that is the document that we all worked from in the two different scenarios where we had to close school, once for extreme cold temperatures below zero and once for the snow. Last Friday, I believe, or the Friday before last, the North Cook Superintendent Group also got together, and there's around 39, 40 districts represented in that room. And we really just opened up a conversation to just share across districts, what are some of the factors that you take into consideration? And I think first and foremost, there's not an exact science to weather, as you know. You make decisions based on the data that you have at the moment, and some of the key factors certainly have to do with the forecast. A hard and fast number was 25 degrees sustained wind chill or below. And for those 3 freeze days, we had that, and in some cases it was below 25 degrees. So it's it's really not even a guideline. If we're below 25, wind chill or more, we really feel it's dangerous to keep school open, to put staff in car, to run the buses, to have kids potentially walk to school, stand on the corners. That's going to cause all the districts to really take pause. Certainly snow accumulation. If snow falls, and there's always a timing element to that. If snow falls throughout the night and into the morning, it makes it very difficult to clear the roads, to get the buses out of the bay, to get staff in here. So snow accumulation is a factor. Falling as well as drifting snow. On our snow day, We had an impact on visibility, which then affects drivability and the safety of putting kids in buses, staffed in cars to get to school. I know when I talked to a couple of you at Super Bowl Sunday, roads weren't clear, side streets weren't clear. So again, that's a factor. How swiftly is the community able to keep up with snow removal? I know our guys were working all day. They worked all day on Sunday and into the evening, and they just could not get ahead of it. Even with the new tractors that they reported were fantastic, so thank you. It was cutting their time in half in terms of their ability to clear. But as quickly as they could clear all 8 facilities, they had to just start back over again. So that was certainly a factor, and that was a factor across all these districts. Then we got into the conversation about when to pull the trigger. When do you call school? Is it better to call it early and hope that the information that you're dealing with isn't going to change? Is it better to wait? And we had districts at the table, 214, for example, you know, their poor superintendent, Dr. Schuler, was kind of crucified because he didn't call it. He said he wasn't going to call it, and then he called it because the weather was terrible. Then another district, you know, called it early, and then the weather didn't change it. So you just don't know, but we really do try to communicate with each other. We have a set of factors that we really look towards, and then we ask ourselves at the end of the day, is it really safe to put staff and students on the road, on the corners, and getting to school? And if we have any inclination that it's not going to be safe, we would rather err on the side of student safety. We have 4 days built into our calendar, so we're not going to have another day of school unless we move beyond 4 snow or cold weather days. So we build those days into the calendar. I think it's very important to emphasize to your neighborhood pals that we put those days there so we don't have to make decisions that could jeopardize safety. So that is kind of the report in terms of the factors that we use to try to determine if we're going to be in school or if we're going to call it.
I just have one question. You know, in our district, we have some children, obviously, who walk to school, but a great number take the bus, and a great number are dropped off. And whereas CPS, for instance, it's a necessity to keep it open. There's a lot of kids who require just to go to school to eat on a regular day. So do we have a policy that if the weather is bad enough, we stay open, and if a parent thinks it's, you know, I can't drive you, you're not taking the bus, you have to walk, and I think it's too bad for you, so you stay home. And we have a stay home policy where they're not penalized on such a bad day. Is there such a thing like that?
No, not that I'm aware of.
It's either open, and closed, or closed.
Right.
Okay.
And in terms of our ridership, we have 2,200 kids that we transport by bus that pay for bus service. Now, we don't know if every single one of them rides the bus every day, but we have 2,200 students that pay for bus transportation. About half.
Yeah.
So we're not as parent, hop in the car and I'll drive you, as I think some of the community thinks. So we are about 50%.
When you say pay.
Who pay to ride, that we transport.
That we transport.
Right, not all pay to ride, right, who we
Yeah.
transport, we qualify that.
Beyond a mile and a
Right.
half, beyond, yeah.
That we
Yeah.
transport, is that
Okay.
what I'm saying? Okay, so that has to do with cold weather, and let's hope that we've seen the worst of it and we don't have any more cold weather days.
Nice.
That would be great, right? So CEC, as you know, because I wrote about it a lot, they came last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they did their system overview assessment. And they had 29 members of the team spend a day with the district office staff, many board members, parent community members, PTO presidents. They spent Wednesday in all the schools, and then Thursday morning they were here as a large team, kind of debriefing, putting some of their initial thoughts together. What we're waiting for now is a summary of their findings, and we're hoping within the next few weeks to have that. At that time, we will do a presentation to the Board of Education on their findings, and then it'll be our job to take that data and to look at it and determine what of their big findings we think we want to move on, and if it'll be, you know, a couple of them in 15-16, another couple in 16-17, but we want to synthesize the data and figure out how best to use it.
Has the verbal report been placed on the website yet?
The initial report from Perry has been placed on the staff portal. It is not posted on the website at this point. I would actually rather have the written full summary, because I just think that that's going to tell the story. Perry gave very big brushstrokes to a room largely made up of administration, but I think the written report, the video was good, but we had more questions. We wanted more information, and he just didn't have the time. So I think it has been our decision that we're going to wait and just release the written report to the community. It will be written with different audiences in mind. You'll have an executive summary for the board level. You'll have something that will be written for the parents and community, and I think we're going to wait and post that written report and potentially then send out a school messenger with a link informing parents to go and take a look at this report.
Lori, if you've got that on the administrative portal, can you also put it on the board document portal as well, so that the 7 of us can hear what the staff already knows?
Yeah.
And would it make any sense to put that video on after the written document comes out? Because if you had questions on the audio, the video, then you can go to the written document?
Sure. I think, yeah, that would make more sense than putting the video out now, because it's kind of my opinion that I almost wish we didn't have the oral report. I would have liked to have honestly just waited for the written report, you know, retrospectively. If he were to come out again, I would say, on the verbal report, you spend your couple of weeks writing it up and really thinking deeply and synthesizing and giving us evidence and examples versus broad brushstrokes, because we kind of sat there with more questions. And we had nobody to ask those questions to, because it was a hour time slot. So board portal for the video. But again, you'll have a million questions when you hear it, and I just
Understand.
I beg that you wait. No, let me finish. I beg that you wait for the written report, and then we'll open it up. We'll have probably a special meeting to talk about it, and all your questions will be answered. Okay. All right. So, Wellness Council. I've written about this to you, but we have a wellness council in district. We meet a number of times a year, and I would say one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now in the month of February, it's Heart Health Awareness Month, as you may know, our Red Out, and that is kicking off this week. And they're just doing an educational blast at each school levels to help kids know that there are certain things that they can do to never too young to be healthy, from getting enough rest, getting enough exercise, watching their sugar intake. So teachers and the PE teachers are going to be taking on some of this training with our kids during the week. They have made available red t-shirts. Friday will be a red out, and we're all going to wear those of us that purchase t-shirts, our red heart health t-shirts on Friday. And I think our wellness committee decided that we were going to make a donation in memory of Lisa Garcia. As you know, very sadly, it was the Roosevelt teacher who unexpectedly passed away of a heart attack in January. There will be some raffles to get the kids involved in participating in this Red Out event. Whole Foods is going to do another benefit day at the end of February, and proceeds will be donated to the AHA. And one last thing that will be happening in the schools, it's during lunch. There are going to be little heart-healthy folks roaming through the lunchroom looking for healthy lunches, and that parents are packing healthy choices for kids to eat, and they'll have some additional incentives and donations made at the school level.
Wearing red t-shirts.
Yes, the little elves will be wearing the t-shirt. And then, so that's really it. Our next meeting will be March 3rd, but I think it's a nice way to get the staff involved in just continuing to make healthy choices, and certainly very timely based on the loss we faced as a district. What's next? Strategic planning. So as if CEC wasn't enough last week, we kicked off strategic planning on Saturday morning, and I think we're all still recovering from a very, very busy week last week. But as you heard me share, Bob Ewey was our consultant. He came on Friday or Saturday morning. Actually, he did come on Friday, and he met with the executive committee. He was moved around the district by Bernadette and Lori, and they toured our facilities and our community, so he had a sense of what makes Park Ridge, and he got to see all of our schools in action. It was during Institute Day, so there were no children, but he saw our facilities, and then he really led it was about almost a 40-member team through some activities that got us really entrenched in what are we dealing with internally, what's our environment like, and I put together an environmental scan that I will share with the full board in my Friday memo this Friday. And then he really engaged the stakeholder participants in reading and discussing national as well as international trends in education. Bob's focus when he strategic plans is really what's on the horizon that that you know are opportunities and what might some challenges be. And he really looks at, instead of a laundry list of tasks for the district to check off doing, he says, you know, what information do you need to have so you can very strategically and systematically plan to reach your goals and to address any potential threats. So he really engaged us in a local as well as in a national and international, I guess, deep reading and discussion about things that we need to be aware of before we start to decide how we're going to allocate our time and our resources, both financial and people resources as we move forward. So Scott and John were part of the strategic planning committee. Anything to add in terms of our first meeting?
I guess I just underscore the degree to which I think all 7 of us will want to pay attention to this. We've got about 40 people, community members, staff members, on a team, and basically the mission is going to be to define priorities for the district for the next 5 years. They're going to, we met this Saturday, there'll be a March meeting, an April meeting, a May meeting, and then there will be a report out to the board. And, if the strategic plan is any good, it will speak to priorities with, some level of concreteness. It won't be, abstract edgy speak. It will say, we're going to do this over the next 5 years. And I think as board members, particularly the continuing board members, you should really, be concerned with that. Because, you're going to want to have some role in what that is. I don't think we want to get into a situation like we did with the last plan, where we had a strategic plan, and then a little bit later, the board had its own priorities, and they were not necessarily the same as the strategic plan. And we had a new superintendent who, perhaps had other areas of emphasis, and eventually, we got kind of bogged down with too many things. So I think you're going to want to be comfortable that by the time you get presented with the final strategic plan in May, that it's something you already understand somewhat and that you feel comfortable with, and so that it's not coming out of left field to either be something that you sort of dismiss as not really my problem, or something that you just disagree with. So kind of to that end, to the extent that there are surveys or other kind of specific report outs that we can make from the meetings, Scott and I will make sure to do that, because I certainly like, especially as a non-continuing board member, I'd like to make sure that I'm channeling you guys as much as possible rather than just my own, thoughts when we meet. The first thing I'm aware of that will be coming out of this is a survey that Bob Ely, the facilitator, is hoping that those of us on the strategic planning team will share with any and all community groups that we happen to encounter. And the most obvious group to share it with is the board. So as soon as we have that survey, I'd like to make sure that you guys all see it and, can tell Scott and me what you think about the various priorities. I haven't even seen the survey yet, so I'm not quite sure what it's going to ask. And that's basically, for me, the bottom line, is making sure that you all are paying attention to what happens in the meetings, and that to the extent that you have opinions, you have a chance to channel through Scott and me and Lori, frankly.
Bob has sent the draft survey to us, as he said he would today. Bernadette and I are scheduled to meet tomorrow to fine tune it, and then we'll get it out to you. The other thing he did ask is because many of you are not just members of this board, you're involved in other boards and you have different community groups that you're part of. He would really like you to take every opportunity you can, because we talked about, for example, 5E, that survey is out, that climate survey, and we have very low parental participation numbers. In some schools, it's coming in at single-digit percentages of participation. So one of the teachers, Deb Graziano, raised the concern that if we do another survey and we don't have high participation, then how is it really a community-driven or a stakeholder-driven strategic plan? So we're going to create some type of a paper survey as well, and then we're going to all keep them in our purses or our briefcases, so anywhere we really go where we have a captive audience, we're gonna encourage people to talk about the importance of filling out. We're gonna try to keep it to a 4 or 5 question survey, so it shouldn't take, too long for people to really weigh in on those priorities as John talked about.
Is
What's
that
the
too-
most important?
Is that too few questions?
He sees the value of the questions in forced choice. They're gonna give us exactly what we're looking for. There will be a narrative component though, if people have more that they would like to share beyond the forced choice questions that are found on the survey.
When will the survey be sent out?
We will take a look at it tomorrow, and then we're gonna try to get it out to the committee members within this week.
And that's the community when we should.
Within this week.
The community?
Mhm.
Is the strategic plan sessions going to be videotaped?
No,
No, they're not.
I mean, we didn't.
To keep everybody abreast on what's going on, might be nice to be able to review those.
Did we tape the strategic plan last time? Yeah?
Well,
I think you can
Just-
take the summaries at the board meetings and the things we're gonna talk about. I mean, I don't think it's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you're gonna wanna watch several hours of strategic plan, particularly because, and I'm thinking out loud here, because I hadn't thought
Yeah,
about this at
thought.
all. You've got quite a cross-section of people, so unlike when you take the 7 of us who are all elected with the understanding that we're gonna be videotaped, and we're used to pontificating.
And a large percentage of it is people breaking into small teams, talking amongst themselves. And we didn't necessarily at
Report
that
out.
meeting share back with one another. It went back to the consultant who's gonna synthesize it on our behalf
Yeah.
with his knowledge base from the outside. So I'm not sure that there would be anything meaningful, but a lot of noise for, I'd say, 60 to 75% of
so it's
what
not
occurred.
it's not amenable. then?
No, I wouldn't think it was amenable. If,
At least the first wasn't.
yeah, I would say the one thing to maybe reiterate, we were talking about reaching out to the community. If there was a concern I had with the membership of the committee, it was that it seemed that parents of students who were not employees seemed underrepresented out of the group. I did see 1 or 2 didn't attend who were part of that group. There were certainly community members whose kids had gone through the school district, represented fairly well. There were a lot of teachers who live here, have students here, but I only counted maybe 1 or 2 who were just pure parents in the group. So when if you could almost be advocates of the survey to get
For parents.
for parents and groups you see or neighbors or friends that you see, that would be helpful, because if they're not represented there, I certainly would want to make sure that they're adequately represented through the survey process, because there really weren't many in that group that weren't employees of the district, quite frankly. Other than a handful of people who didn't have kids there
I
anymore.
think we had 5. Am I correct, Bernadette? Do we have 5 parents that were represented of our list of 39
Who weren't employees?
who weren't employees?
Yeah, and again, I just, going around listening to people's introductions, and then looking at the name tags remaining, it seemed that at that meeting, might have been only 1 or 2.
I
But
think we had 5, I'm pretty sure.
anyways, it was just
Yeah.
something I was gonna say, if you would, I wanna make sure that they are represented, that's all.
And I agree with Scott, regardless of the number, I think if you guys could focus on kind of your people in your neighborhood, that would be fantastic. And then again, your library board or, soccer coach, hit people up to participate in the survey. Because we really do want a high return rate. So we have a good cross-section of feedback.
Next time we should-
I'm sorry,
The joke is the next time we should just package it with the survey for when to start school and then.
And
We're not sponsoring anything.
Make it one of the documents you have to do to verify residency.
Let's complete all surveys.
the final question I have is, how are we going to integrate the 5E survey and the CEC results into the strategic plan process?
Well, the CEC will give us 3 to 4 recommendations in the 3 categories of learning, of results, and collaboration. So once we see what the report is and the recommendations, what comes forward, we will talk administratively, and then we will bring the data to the strategic planning committee to see which categories of the plan it might be able to nest within. In terms of the 5E, that's a climate survey, so we really have to give thought to that climate piece. It is something that came through as a finding within the CEC's visit, is that we do need to get at the culture and the climate and the trust between the teachers and the board and the teachers and administration. So we really do have to talk about, how we're going to build a strategic goal or turn climate that might be a challenge at this point in some areas into
That's it.
something that we focus on.
That certainly may be part of the strategic plan, is to enhance that climate and
Right.
change that climate. That's why I asked,
my
you know,
goal.
how are you gonna take that data? So from what you're saying is, and those were 2 of the 5 questions, by the way. So you're going to take that data and present it to the strategic plan. What I'm afraid that may happen is, let's say CEC comes out with 5 recommendations, and only 4 or 3 are put into the strategic plan. I'm wondering, I have a fear that some of the ideas on the strategic plan process may be somewhat proprietary, where the CEC comes in and they're all, it's more of a globally based thought process. Does that make any sense?
It does. CEC's, the criteria in which they use to rate us in those 3 areas, there's 50 categories. Effective practices, I guess, is a better phrase, that we're going to be kind of judged against. So if we had an organization that was doing, all of these practices, we would have a really high-performing, organization. So they're going to give us priorities, and, we have to talk as an administrative team and as other members of our leadership team to decide how much merit we're going to place on, their recommendations, and then we have to really map it out over a number of years to see how we can phase them all in. We're not going to be able to do everything in year 1, which is why we're writing a multi-year plan.
Well,
So,
it's a 5-year strategic plan.
right, so, we'll figure out how to use that data, but it's one data point. We've got the 5E, we're going to have feedback from the master facility study, we're going to have survey data, so we're going to have a variety of data points that we're going to really have to consider and then prioritize. Because Bob talked to the group about, people can come in and wish for everything. But he wants to get, I think what he's very, very good at is getting very focused on what are the most important things you can do, kind of those levers that you can turn to really improve this district, versus just a million different things to do. So we're going to get more focused on effective practices and how to move the organization systemically forward versus just a to-do list. So I think it's going to have a different flavor and a different focus than the last strategic plan.
And you can kind of see why you're going to want to feel comfortable with that, because if it's a matter of narrowing the focus to, 2 or 3 big things, you're going to want to make sure you agree with the 2 or 3 big things. And you're going to want to make sure the new board members do too. Otherwise it will only last a year or 2.
Do you foresee the strategic plan being completed prior to the new board being seated, or after?
It's pretty close, because I think our last meeting is the end of May. We have one in March, we have one in April, we have one in May. The board's going to be seated at the beginning of May. So, they're going to be on the board for a handful of weeks, and that plan will be complete. But, we'll spend board meeting after board meeting once they're seated talking about the strategic plan.
Or special
And
board
getting them
meeting.
involved, yeah.
Special board meeting.
So we'll keep it front and center.
Okay.
Couple more things, because I know it's getting late. Science Olympiad, I wrote to you about a high level of participation this year. We had over 300 students at our Science Olympiad that was also on Saturday morning. I know Dr. Lopez hit the Olympiad before coming to strategic planning. And we have a press release going out that's going to list the different winners. I don't want to run through them all, but we had great representation at all schools, and we have an extensive list of winners. Some of the things kids participated in: the egg drop event, the mystery box event, rubber band catapult, which sounds most exciting to me, structured team events, aerodynamics, and the list goes on and on. But over 300 students, and in tracking numbers, as I wrote to you, we had a lot of girls participate in the Science Olympiad at the upper grades. So we were excited to see not a gender divide, but almost equal participation. So I think that was exciting. Just a good event, and I was happy to see the numbers continue to grow. All right, what else do I want to tell you? So immunization. Anyone heard in the news that there's trouble with the measles? Well, I wanted to make sure that you had a miss I left for you at your board seat. Madeline will put this up on the wiki. This just came about based on some emails that were spinning around on Sunday and Monday. So Bernadette and I put this together today in consultation with Margaret, our district nurse. And a couple of you asked, we have a board policy about student exemptions for vaccinations, and there's two reasons. There's a medical reason for an objection or a religious reason. That is also supported by Illinois School Code. And in my written report, I explained the medical exemptions and the religious exemptions. So does anyone have any questions on the exemptions? This was something I also emailed you, this portion, so you had a chance to read that earlier today.
Just so I understand, because I know that there, and sometimes I get leery, or I get curious between a law and a school code policy or whatever, what you would call it. Those two exemptions, effectively, we have no choice. We cannot choose to not offer them. We are, as a public school district, we must offer those.
Right, they're governed by school code.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
I have the little tabs.
No, that's perfect. I just wanted to make sure that my understanding was clear, that those
Papers
two
tab.
exemptions are mandated.
Yes,
So
correct.
we have we can't change them if we want.
You're right.
Perfect, that's all I want to know.
Did you see the article in the Tribune that came out just a day or two ago? And little thing on the bottom said you can go to a certain website to see if your school has a certain percentage of people non-immunized. Had anybody
School
gone?
report card has that.
So what I've given you
Does it-
in your paper, your C copy, is from the immunization data tracking. There is such a thing. On our website, under health services, as required by the Illinois School Code, we're obliged to provide a link to an annual district immunization summary that we provide to the Illinois State Board of Ed. So this information, and this will be emailed to you, or put on the wiki rather, then you will have hot links, and you can just click right on those links. But I've reported out the enrollment, the religious exemptions, as well as the medical exemption in this written report to you. And then, just so you know, and I've shared this with you, the ongoing procedural, what we do in the event of suspected outbreaks or actual outbreaks for some of the communicable diseases, we have a tip sheet that we put in place, and then I put that information in here as well.
Where is all this data found?
This is on the district website under health services.
I know that we have on the right-hand side, there's that list of things. Would it be nice to have a little bullet and direct people to that if they have any questions?
In terms of, specifically in terms of measles or
Yeah,
communicable diseases? in
communicable
general?
disease, specifically measles and communicable diseases. Just alerting people to know that they can go to a specific location to find the data.
Sure, we can do that. The board think it's a good idea, everybody? Put a little something, all this information, or just this communicable diseases, we can do a pull down, or a hot link to where you can find this stuff? What do you think?
Yes and all, yeah.
Whatever.
But he brings up a good point, since it's such a hot topic.
Yeah, I guess the important thing too to remember, and I, talked to a few people about this, is we have a handful of kids that aren't immunized, and if we were to have a case of the measles, it's those handful of kids that are the ones that are at risk. The kids that have been immunized, I'm getting tired, I apologize. They're safe, they're good, they've got their shots. So we exclude them for 21 days, and, so we feel pretty confident. We are guided by the Illinois Department of Public Health. One case or suspected case, we have to report it, and then really they come in and would help manage the situation. So, we feel like we have good protocols in place, and if it were to happen, we get the big guns involved, and they really help us navigate it. A couple of things I hope you take advantage of. We have a parent university about park. That's our new state assessment. It's before our next board meeting on Monday, February 23rd from 6 to 7:30. Dr. Lopez is going to talk to parents through park, and they're going to get to take some sample tests. And I think you'd be surprised the kind of problems that the kids are going to be faced with. What else? I think that's it.
That it?
Oh, and just lastly,
No.
sorry. Oh, Scott gave me a quick update at Carpenter. It's kind of are we there yet? Are we done with Carpenter yet? Scott's coming up to bring us home.
I'll bring us home real quick. We are really we've got Carpenter knocked out. I mean, I'm very leery to say that just because it's been
Jinx
going
or
so
knock
well,
on
and I
wood.
feel like I'm going to jinx it. But yeah, we've had just a couple of minor things, some parts that went bad in one of the units, and we replaced those. Just kind of normal things, nothing out of the ordinary. We're working on just getting this warm-up feature that's coming on the VRS, which brings the fresh air in. It just closes the damper for a certain amount of time, so we're just recycling the air as we heat it instead of mixing it with air when there's no children in the building. Once the kids come in the building, that damper opens up and we meet our fresh air requirements. So we just got a couple of tweaks on that. And then, as I said on Friday, knock on wood, it's running pretty well. So we're probably going to go making some move to get that project closed out here very shortly. Yes, Becky wants it closed out before she retires. So, but I understand I have a 2-day less window now, so
Yes.
I'll work
Yeah.
a little harder on it. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, questions? None? Not hearing any, have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.